Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to colinslaststand.com. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 117. My name is Colin Moriarty, and for the very first time in Sacred Symbols' auspicious run, Chris Raygun is not joining me today as he is under the weather. So I've pulled off the bench, dusted off the cobwebs, dusted him off, put some clothes on him, fed him, bathed him.
I like that.
Etc. On the other mic is Dustin, the replacement Furman. Dustin, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Colin. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, so for the people that are unaware of who Dustin is Colin's Last Stand's my company's only full-time employee other than me. And he edits the podcast is basically his main task, but he also does half of our side quest videos on YouTube and a bunch of other, I don't know, administrative tasks, I guess you want to call them for me. And
that sounds about right.
Right now, he's going through and deleting a bunch of stuff off of Patreon that I didn't want there anymore, like things that are just random posts, and he accidentally deleted an episode of the show, actually. So
yeah, I fucked
who knows
up
when we're going to get back.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's all right. It really doesn't matter. We'll just add it later. It's like episode 70-something, in case anyone's looking for it.
It's amazing, though, because Patreon, and we've talked about this, and you've talked about it on the show, but Patreon's back-end service is just, you know, I don't want to fill the role of Chris here, but baffling, truly.
Yeah, well, someone's got to do it. Yeah, it's not great. That's why I always encourage everyone to use the RSS feed if you sign up. And of course, you can get every episode of this show 3 days early and ad-free by supporting us at patreon.com/colinslaststand, where more than 10,000 of you do. It allows you to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to our show. And you even get exclusive access only for patrons to Sacred Symbols Plus, which is our weekly additional episode of this show. Last week, Chris and I did a deep dive for more than an hour on the Bethesda deal with Microsoft. Worry not, though, if you are a freeloader like so many of you scallywags and scoundrels are. We're going to talk a lot about that today when we get into the news as well. So fear not. Fear not. Now, Dustin, this is episode 117. I've been told, I've only played the first 2 Halo games, and it was so long ago. I don't remember them at all. But I've been told that this number has something to do important with Halo. And so I thought it was ironic that for the first time in 117 weeks, Chris is missing an episode of the show when his favorite franchise is in some sort of spotlight
right
on our show. What is the number? What's the number? Do you have any idea what it means?
So 117 is Master Chief's number. Like, I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. Like, I fucked around reading the books when I was in like 6th grade or something. And so I can remember little tidbits. Though I think this is in the game also, that his name is like John 117. He doesn't have a last name because he was plucked away as a baby. And so, yeah, 117, an important number for the Halo franchise.
I like Halo. I think it's fun whenever I played it. I've enjoyed it. But can it get any more boring? The character's name is Master Chief and his name is John.
Right.
It's
yeah.
Just, come on. Master Chief and John.
Right.
That's what you've come up with for your protagonist. Okay. That's fine. People like it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because growing up, I was obsessed with Halo. Like I said, I was reading the books and things like that. And then suddenly, I don't know. I hate to say it, but when 343 took over, something about the magic was lost on me. And now I just really don't care at all. So it's kind of sad because I see like Halo Infinite and it's like I want to be excited. There's like a little part of me that remembers. And I'm not saying that, you know, these new Halo games were terrible by any means, but they're not scratching that itch for me like it did when I was a kid.
I hear you completely. I did love Halo. Was the first game I bought when I got my Xbox. I did love it, but yeah, not a huge fan. I wasn't a shooter fan back then very much. I was playing like Medal of Honor and random things like that, but Soldier of Fortune on PC was like one of my favorites, but I don't know, maybe I just started playing it too early so that by the time I really got into shooters, which was during the PS3 era, frankly, is when I really started to play shooters. Resistance 2 is the game that really got me into them back in whatever that was, 2008. So yeah, anyway, this isn't an Xbox podcast, so we don't have to talk too deeply about that. Although we will be talking about Xbox pretty heavily later on in this episode. Now, Dustin, do you want to introduce yourself to the fans as a human being and not just my employee, so that people understand that you're real, and maybe you'll do so well on the show we'll just fire Chris.
Oh, well, I mean, that wouldn't be a great thing to do, but I mean, it is a possibility, I guess.
It's one of many possibilities that could happen, spawn off like a butterfly effect from this show.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, other than just like I'm from Pennsylvania. I've been working with you and CLS for over a year. It's hard because there was like a freelance period and then an actual employee period. The actual employee is like just over a year now. I host my own show called the HP Podcast, if you guys want to check that out. I also do Side Quest, which has been going awesome. Maddie and I have been having a lot of fun doing that. And we read all your comments. You know, some people still not really on board, but that's okay. I feel like the content's been good and a lot of you agree. And so we appreciate the warm welcome. I'm also on Maddie's weekly podcast called The Ham Radio. That's with him, of course, and ACG, who is a very well-known and well-respected YouTuber and reviewer. And I think that's like the business plugs. I don't know if we want to say anything else, if there's anything really that important.
I mean, I don't know. What were you going to go from here? I don't know. You're going to tell me about, I don't know, your favorite color or something? I don't know what you want. It seemed like you kind of covered everything that's, relevant to this show. And if the more you're on the show, the more we're going to learn about your weird quirks as well. So we'll get into it. Are you a little nervous right now? How are you feeling?
Here's the thing with these is that I'm usually like nervous, just like a tiny bit before I start. And then like already now that we're on a flow, totally no problem. So I'm ready to put you on blast anywhere that I can, basically.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know this show better than anyone because you edit it every week. And so no one knows the show better than you. So you should know how to fill in very well for Chris. And we're wishing him well. He's just under the weather. And that's very unlike Chris. So when he said that to me, I didn't press at all. He's maybe he's got COVID. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, here's the weird thing is that I was sick last week and I was pretty much positive that it wasn't COVID because I did not have a fever. And there's a few other people that I'm hearing about in my community that are sick. And then you told me that Chris was sick. And we were talking about the possibility of having Maddie on this show as well. And he's not feeling well either. So I don't know if there's like a second, thing going around right now, but it definitely seems like a lot of people are under the weather. Yeah, it does. It's that time of year. I mean, we're so wrapped up in COVID naturally that we forget that there's a whole flu cycle that will now be background radiation behind the COVID scare. Millions of people are going to get the flu in the United States and think that they have COVID. It's going to be a really exciting time for everyone. Yeah, well, I'm sure that almost everybody in the past, since March, if you even feel like a tickle in your throat, the thought crosses your mind, of course, like, is this it? Do I have the virus? So I know it crossed my mind, but who knows? Maybe I did have it. So it hasn't crossed my mind at all I've not been nervous about it at all. Yeah. I don't know. Mostly because I have no communication or interaction with anyone. So how am I going to get it? The thing for me also is that I was at PAX in March, like, I don't know, 3 weeks before the lockdowns started. And I was around thousands and thousands of people. So if I didn't at least like pick it up as a, what's the word I'm looking for? A asymptomatic person. Then asymptomatic, sure. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, it's interesting. If you were people at that PAX definitely had it, I'm sure. So because people had it since like November. So or November prior. So anyway, none of this really matters. This is not an epidemiology podcast. It can be if we wanted to make it that, but I don't think it would really be very good. Let me see here. I'm going through our notes. Oh, Twin Breaker, the game I wrote from the publisher and developer I own half of, now came to Switch, Xbox One, and PC. So it is now basically available everywhere that you play your video games. So PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, Nintendo Switch, Microsoft Xbox One, and PC via Steam. And I think it's on Humble as well. I think I tweeted that out earlier. So you have your options. Please do support the game if you can. We're really happy with it. We like it. Hypocritical 2 is coming soon. We have to submit it next month. And then we'll see what happens. I'm writing it and it's driving me insane because I have so many other things to do as well.
But it's so good. I was telling someone in the comments on Patreon, Habroxia too, what I said was we're really cooking with gas with that game. It's really good. Really, really good. I'm really, really excited about it. I think people are going to like it a lot. Let's see here. David Graham wrote into us on Patreon, Dustin. He says, greetings, fine gents. Did either of you, so he's wondering about me and Chris, but he doesn't know that Chris was going to come down with COVID. So
sure.
He said, did either of you get picked for the PlayStation Direct pre-order raffle? Hosting a PlayStation podcast, but not being deemed as having enough interest and PlayStation activity, in quotes. Seems exactly like the kind of thing that would happen to you. I actually managed to snag one myself this way, which is incidentally the first time in my life that I have ever pre-ordered a console. I did not get the email, not really surprisingly, from PlayStation. They have such a weird grudge against me that it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if they went in the back end and made sure that no amount of PlayStation activity was going to get me that console from them. But I did get it from other places. But I was a little surprised because I'm on my PlayStation all day, but I don't know what they're judging because I have a ton of trophies and a ton of activity. I also spend a lot of money on PSN. So I'm really interested to see how they determine this. But did you get an email from them about this, Dustin? Oh, you did get it.
Yeah, I did. What's weird is that they put out 2 waves before they even opened up the pre-orders. And so I got on the second wave. And so, yeah, I actually did pre-order one through them just because they're the only ones that will guarantee launch day delivery. So I have one pre-ordered through there. And, you know, honestly, Colin, I don't think that they have any kind of rhyme or reason for this based on what I'm seeing online and talking to people I know. My guess is that it's just like completely random and they're acting like there's some kind of specific criteria, because I personally have not seen any kind of indicator of what got you selected.
Yeah, I'd love to know if there is some algorithmic thing or if it's just well, we talked about it a few weeks ago. One of those bingo things. We had a name for it. What is it? A trough? I don't remember. Where they pull the balls out.
Right.
Not don't pull your balls out. I'm saying you're pulling balls out of the bingo thing. Anyway, so I'm wondering how it all worked out, but I don't really give a shit. I remember once, you know how some people are verified on PlayStation Network? They actually did offer that to me when I was still in their good graces, and I said no, I didn't want it because I didn't want people to bother me on there. I'm so curmudgeonly.
You are. I had to manually add myself to your PlayStation friends list.
Did you do that when you were here?
Yeah, you watched me do it.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember what I did 5 minutes ago. So
that's fair.
I'm pretty sure I worked out today, but I don't know. It's in one ear and out the other, I got to say, Dustin. Now, let's see here. Let's stay on the same topic from Nathan Kennard. I don't know if that's his name or if it's Conrad, and I just spelt it wrong. So it could be Kennard, but I feel like it might be Conrad. He says, hey, CNC, what do you think of people getting console pre-orders from several retailers? To me, this is almost as bad as the bots and scalpers. Thoughts, as always, you are the best podcast, period. Keep up the great work and stay safe. I think you're right. I think this is probably the best podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Nathan asks a question here, and I must say that he wouldn't like what I did because I pre-ordered the console from 3 retailers. I have 3 PlayStation 5s coming. I'm not shy about telling that to people. I'm wondering how before I get into my rationale, I'm kind of curious what your take is on it. And if you because some people on social media have come at me and been like, people like you are the reason that I can't get a console, or some people can't get a console. And I do have a retort. But before I retort, I'm curious what you think about people, not scalping or anything like that, but just buying multiple consoles at launch.
Right. Well, I don't know. I have 3 pre-ordered right now. 1 I'm taking. 1 is because my friend missed out. And the other one I had as a backup because it was on Amazon and I just thought, screw it. I'm just going to pre-order one there. I may end up canceling it. I have no plans to scalp any of these consoles. If anything, I will hold on to one just to see if anyone I know or, locally, if somebody needs a console and isn't able to get one. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe if you're taking like a ton of pre-orders, but if you're not scalping them, then I don't know. I personally don't see any problem with it, especially if you're helping out, friends or whatever. And if you end up canceling it, then there's a pre-order for someone else who didn't get one. So I don't know. To me, and I'm starting off good here because I'm going to start off with an unpopular take, but I really don't think pre-ordering these consoles was quite as hard as a lot of people may have thought, just because I feel like if you were intentional and like watching the internet, and I know not everyone has the luxury to do that, but we've seen numerous chances so far, and there's already even more. I saw that GameStop is going to be opening up more pre-orders tomorrow. So there's a lot of opportunities to still pre-order these consoles. I wouldn't get too worried yet if you haven't been able to get one.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I mean, so I think scalping these consoles is wrong, and I wouldn't do that anyway. It's funny because someone in my family, like I don't know if it was my nephew or one of my cousins or whatever, was like, oh, if you have too many, you can just scalp one and like, you know, sell it for a profit or whatever. And I'm like, I wouldn't do that. I don't think I've ever really done that with anything in my life, but I certainly wouldn't do that with video game consoles. I don't need the money, and I wouldn't put someone out there to be like, you want my PS5? You can pay $1,000 for it. That's not my style at all. My whole thing here is the fact, when I started seeing that a lot of people were getting multiple consoles, like at least in our circles on social media and stuff, to me, that just reflected an ineptitude with the manufacturer, Sony, and with the retailers at Amazon, Walmart, etc., by not being able to guarantee that these things are going to be delivered on time, by not being able to guarantee that when you take, it's like the Seinfeld episode, you know how to take the reservation, but you have to hold the reservation, right? So if I went in to retailer X and I knew for a fact that my console was going to go through and come on time and I would be able to play it, then I probably would have just gotten, you know, one for myself, but I needed to have a backup. I want two anyway, one of each, but I probably, if I would have had more faith in the system, maybe just gotten one anyway, but I have no faith in the system. We already saw why you shouldn't have faith in the system. A lot of people with Walmart pre-orders got theirs turned down, and then Amazon sent out an email telling people that they're probably not going to get them delivered on time and stuff. It's a total shit show. That's not my fault, nor is it my problem, because to Dustin's point, I was ready to go. I had all my accounts up. I didn't know when things were going to start popping up at different retailers. And so I was logged into Walmart. I was logged into Target. And I had everything ready to go. And to your point, it seemed like, I mean, I have no doubt that many a person tried to get one and weren't able to get one. But you do make a good point that at the three retailers that I tried to get one at, I just bought three, two for me and one for my nephews. I want to give them for Christmas because I always get them PlayStation stuff for Christmas. Bought them their PS3 and PS4 and Switch. So I want to continue that tradition. But I had no problems at any of these places getting the console. So it's a little weird, like how it hits for different people. Like I just went to Walmart.com. I F5'd a couple times. I got the console. Went to Target.com. F5'd a couple times. Got the console. Went to Amazon. Immediately got the console.
Right.
So to me, it's a reflection of a really broken system where we just can't rely on getting our pre-order at all, and people are scared. And so when I saw that a lot of people were doing this both in and out of the industry, I didn't feel so bad about it anymore, especially because, and I never really felt that bad about it anyway, but especially because I'm buying them for, two of them for me and one of them for someone. So like, who are you to tell me that I can't do that? It's kind of weird. I think people are getting a little salty at the wrong people. I think who you should be mad at is Sony in some way for allowing their retail partners to kind of let it slip through their fingers, but also the retailers for being unreliable. It's not my fault that these things happen. So stop yelling at me.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude.
Yell at Dustin if you want to yell at someone. Don't yell at me. All right, let's see here. All right, before we get into what we're playing, let's go to Ben B here. We're going to rope Dustin into the weird shit we like to talk about on the show from time to time. Ben B says, I know everyone is curious about Microsoft acquiring ZeniMax or console pre-orders. Well, we talked about one of those things. We'll get to the other. But fuck that. I have a deeper concern that needs to be addressed. So now he's referring to a tweet I made a few days ago, Dustin. He says, Colin, replacing hot dogs with mozzarella sticks and putting ketchup, mayo, and grilled onions. What is wrong with you? It is not only concerning, but hypocritical. And even, why are people throwing this word hypocritical around? And even dare I say un-American. You dare make fun of other people's taste in food and then proceed to desecrate the most American food that exists. Double the sin since you are from New York as well. Colin, I'm going to need some time to reevaluate this relationship. Thanks for Tuesdays and Fridays, and keep mostly doing what you're doing. So what he's referring to here is, I discovered that as much as I like hot dogs, what's even tastier is if you just don't put hot dogs in the buns and instead put mozzarella sticks in the buns where the hot dogs would be. And then you just top them as you would. I think it's really tasty. You get the Nathan's rolls, you get some frozen mozzarella sticks, you put them in the oven. You just, you tear the sweetness out of the onion by sauteing them for a really long period of time. You just wipe some mayonnaise on the bun, put a little bit of ketchup, salt, pepper. It's really good. What do you think about that, Dustin?
So I have multiple questions, comments, and concerns really, when it comes to this. Because, so first of all, is this a meal for you, or is this just like a quick snack?
No, this is a meal. I don't snack. I eat once a day.
Right.
So I eat a lot when I eat.
Now, Colin,
yeah,
I want to say this gently, but you've talked about on this show how you have, problems with your digestion.
Yes.
Do you think it's possible that eating a mozzarella stick on a hot dog bun with ketchup and onions may be part of the problem?
Maybe, yeah, it might be.
So
yeah, it could be. That's why I work out.
Now, here's the thing. I have no problem. I think it's terrible and quite frankly disturbing. But I mean, if this is what you want to eat, then do it. If that's what brings you pleasure, then I have no problem with it. Other than, maybe this could be the root of some of your problems. This now, on the other hand, as well, do you browse around Reddit at all?
Once in a blue moon, but not so much. No.
All right. Yeah. You might want to, if you want to get some easy karma, you probably could just take a picture of this and post it in the subreddit shitty food porn, because this sounds like just an absolute perfect candidate front page material, honestly.
Maybe I'll do that. I also sprinkle some cheddar cheese on it as well. I forgot to throw that in there, but it's a good thing. So I discovered when I lived in San Francisco, there was a place I used to go to in the marina that used to put mozzarella sticks on cheeseburgers. Like that was one of the cheeseburgers they had was just mozzarella sticks on it as well as whatever else they put on it. And I was like, this is a really good idea. And ever since then, I started buying mozzarella sticks and putting them on various sandwiches. And there was a place in LA called Fat Sal's, which is near UCLA in Westwood, that had a similar sandwich. So it's not like I just invented this out of thin air, but I do say that I'm maybe modifying it to a degree that is disturbing to some people, but I really enjoyed it. And I was surprised by the pushback I got on it, because a mozzarella stick is a really wonderful thing.
Right.
I mean, what bad could you say about a mozzarella stick? There's nothing negative to say about it. Yeah,
I mean, mozzarella sticks, honestly, one of my favorite fried appetizers. I mean, over here in Western PA, of course, we have Sheetz. Sheetz has fantastic mozzarella sticks. I always get those. Also, a local delicacy here, we have a place that's kind of like Sheetz. It's called Get Go. It's like a derivative of Giant Eagle, which is like a local Pittsburgh area grocery store. They have a sub that is like chicken tenders, mozzarella cheese sticks, and marinara sauce on the sandwich. And it is just fantastic. It nearly every time puts me to sleep because it's like a million carbs. But I cannot disagree about the mozzarella sticks being a fantastic food item.
There's a lot of virtue in the mozzarella stick, and I really love them. I came to them kind of late in life, I gotta admit. I think it was in college when I really started to fall in love with the mozzarella stick, but there was a place in San Francisco when I lived in the Sunset for many years, that part of San Francisco, get really drunk and then go to this pizza shop and just people would get pizza, slice of pizza and sandwiches, and I would just get like 20 mozzarella sticks and just destroy them. And it's a good indicator of why I look like I'm pregnant. So it's getting a little better though now that I'm working out. I think I've only not worked out in the last month 2 days. So I've worked out 28 or 29 days in the last month.
I have never worked out for that many days in a row. So that's pretty good.
I don't know if you know this about me or the audience knows about me. I'm really obsessive. When I get dedicated to something, I just do it. That's why we never miss a week of this episode of the show, right? Never. I know I can get away with it. I could easily just be like, oh, I'm busy. And I don't think I get anyone, but we never, you're always going to get an episode of the show, always get an episode of Knockback, etc. because I'm obsessed with that. And it's the same thing with working out. When I started working out, I'm like, I got to do this every day. And the only reason I missed 2 days was because I literally didn't have the time because I had to go do family stuff. So that's the only thing that's stopping me from being morbidly obese. And we will see how it continues into the future. But I'm quite happy with my Schwinn brand elliptical that I got on Amazon. Put it together myself. It was probably the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. All right. Dustin, let's talk about the games we're playing as we often do next. I'll defer to you. It seems here you're playing a couple of games that I don't even think are on PlayStation. One of them definitely isn't.
Right.
And then a shout out to a documentary as well, which I have no problem you shouting out because it's from a friend of mine as well. So take it away. What are you playing?
Sure. Yeah, it's ironic. The first time I'm on this show, I have no PlayStation games to talk about that I'm currently playing, but I'm sure one of these will be eventually. First of all, I am playing the Super Mario 3D All-Stars port, and I know this has been a bit of a contentious release just because of how Nintendo is doing some shitty stuff with as far as the fact that they're going to vault it at the end of March. And there's also been a little bit of people unhappy about the quality of the ports just because they're simply emulated. There's some up-resed textures, but for the most part, these are the same games, just with a higher resolution and a couple tweaks. Honestly, I don't really have a problem with the quality of the ports. I played a decent amount of Mario 64, pretty fun, but I played Mario Sunshine for the very first time just because growing up, I did not have a GameCube. I played it at a friend's house for a little bit, so it was really awesome to finally play through that game all the way through. Much harder than I would have expected, but
it's a tough one.
I did get through it. And Colin, that's one of your favorites of the Mario series, right?
Yeah, other than Galaxy, that's my favorite 3D Mario game.
Yeah.
Sunshine. I love that game. I remember so distinctly when I got it too. In the late summer of 2002, I got it the same day Onimusha 2 came out, as I recall, and that was a really good day. And that was like one of my last walkthroughs before I started working at IGN that I just wrote for fun.
Yeah, dude, the levels where you don't have FLUDD some of them are surprisingly difficult, like to the point where now that I'm playing through Super Mario Galaxy, I'm like, wow, they really took the difficulty down a notch for this next release. And I'm wondering if that had something to do with it.
It definitely could. Sunshine was the victim, much like Wind Waker, of just being on the GameCube, which is a console I loved. I mean, I adored the GameCube, but I think that people were just so harsh on everything that was on that console. And it's only now that people are looking back and being like, you know what, there's some really good shit on this console. And not only from first party, but also from third party. Obviously, the Capcom 5 or what we got of them are excellent games. And even games like Resident Evil 0, I think, is getting a second look from some people. But certainly Sunshine and Wind Waker were victimized by being on the GameCube and just not being on the cool machine at the time. PS2 was just trouncing it. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. I did hear something about this collection that disturbed me because I was going to buy it. And then, because I buy like one Switch game a year, if that. And I was like, well, I actually really love two of these games. I'm not a huge fan of Mario 64, but I love Galaxy and big fan of Sunshine. So that's a nice collection for me to get. But I heard that with 64 and Sunshine, now I don't remember this because this wasn't part of the conversation with games back then, but those games were inverted Y naturally, which explains, I think, why I play inverted to this day. I think that explains a lot of it. But that they uninverted the controls. Is this true? That they like actually made it so that Y isn't inverted and then there's no way to switch it back? Now, this is a thing that people might not notice, but this is a thing that apparently happened. And I'm like, well, that makes the game literally unplayable for me. I can't play it like that.
Right.
So now I'm not going to buy it.
I saw that story come out, and it's weird because for me, since I don't play inverted, it was just like felt normal to me. But I guess it is really surprising that they wouldn't even put in an option to change it. I mean, I'm not surprised with Nintendo that they just do not care and they're just like, fuck you, you're going to buy it anyway, most likely. But, you know, it is surprising since this is for people that play inverted, a huge deal breaker.
Yeah, I cannot play on inverted Y. I can't. I can't play like that. I have to think too much when I play the game, which is not the way you play video games. You don't play video games by thinking about your every action. That's not how it works. Right. So yeah, when I saw that, I know that they patch games now on Switch, and it's not like Switch was the first Nintendo hardware that they were patching, but I was so confused by that, and because they're emulated, I don't know if they can even really go in and fuck with them any more than that. Although they obviously did fuck with the source material to uninvert the controls. But it was interesting reading that because I was like, that's probably it. Because I remember on the show many times we were trying to get to the bottom of like, why do I play inverted? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not a flight sim fan. I wasn't even growing up playing shooters. It's these fucking Nintendo games. That's what it is. It's the N64 games and the GameCube games on those one sticks. Well, there it is. There's the mystery solved. So I'll keep an eye on that. I would like to get it, but I don't know. That would make me have to play the Switch, and I don't know if that's going to happen. So Hades, talk to me about this.
Yeah. So Hades, I've been interested in checking this out for a while, but I just don't care about playing a game in early access for the most part. I'd rather just wait till it's out. And so I did pick this up, and it is just as fun as everyone is saying. I don't want to, I'm sure that everyone's reading everyone's reviews and takes on it online, but it is really, really fun. And I'm just surprised that that Supergiant as a studio continues just to deliver these incredible, whether it's the art style and even the gameplay, they continue to make these really, really excellent games. I just saw that Hades has sold now over 1 million copies.
Wow.
Now, I think that if I recall correctly, they sold 600,000 or 600,000 or 700,000 in early access. And so they've sold the rest now at the 1.0 release. And so, yeah, this game is cool. It's a little different than their other games in that it is a roguelike, which was really disappointing to me when it was announced, just because I'm kind of over roguelikes in a way. And it's not even that I think a lot of studios do roguelikes in a way that I just don't like. Like, I don't like the over and over without feeling like I'm progressing. And Hades does a really excellent job of letting you upgrade your character to feel like you're progressing. And the way that they weave the story in between each run is really good. So, it's an easy recommendation. If you have any interest in Supergiant games as a whole, then this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, it looks cool. I'll wait because there are so many other games to play right now. Nintendo is obviously wise to get into bed with them. Supergiant jumps around a little bit because they had some deals with PlayStation. And remember, Bastion, their first game, came to Vita, which was super weird. But shout out to Greg Casavin, by the way, who's Supergiant's writer. He wrote Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and Hades. And he used to work at GameSpot. He was a games journalist. So he's like a big-time games writer now, if anyone wants to go look into him. He was one of the early kind of big names at that site before he went. I think he was even editor-in-chief when he left to go to Supergiant. So I played and loved Transistor. Loved it. And Bastion I liked. I came to it late. That was tied to Xbox 360 for a while. I was at IGN at the time, so I was covering PlayStation. Pyre I started to play when it came out. I bought it. I was very happy to buy it, but it was weird and I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. So it's a game I got to get back to. And Hades does look excellent. So Supergiant, I think, is fewer than 24 people as well. This could be a target. People are always talking about now in this Bethesda, this post-Bethesda Microsoft world, which we'll get into in a moment, who Sony could buy. Supergiant is a reasonable ask, especially because they're located in San Francisco. So they're right near Sony HQ. And then you wanted to shout out Console Wars from our friend Blake Harris.
So I just watched this today. Console Wars, if you've never heard of it, is a book by Blake J. Harris. He is a friend of the show. He's really cool, really awesome dude. I've interviewed him before, and I really appreciate him just because he actually reached out to me well before I was involved with CLS or anything like that. And so I always thought that was cool that he did that. And it's also awesome because the book that he wrote, Console Wars, is really, really excellent. And now there's this new documentary that he co-directed that is out on CBS All Access, which, let me tell you, the CBS All Access app on PlayStation is terrible. I couldn't even get it to work. Like, I had it crash on me twice, and I was trying to search just to find it and watch it, and it just wouldn't even show up. So I would recommend, if you are interested in retro gaming, or even, they even bring up PlayStation at the end, kind of when the PlayStation is starting to become a player. Just a really, really interesting story about how Sega was this underdog and Nintendo just had this extremely tight grip on the industry and almost monopolistic in ways, with a lot of like threatening retailers and really, really having, cutthroat competition. And so the documentary, it's an hour and a half long. You can sign up for a 7-day trial and cancel for CBS All Access, but highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, Console Wars is a great book about the Nintendo and Sega days of the early to mid 90s. And it's funny because Blake's a personal friend of mine, and I met him during my IGN days, and he showed me a first cut of Console Wars back in 2014. That's how long this documentary has been circulating, because he came to IGN, and I remember me, Greg, and him were in one of the screening rooms looking at it. It was probably a half an hour of footage and cut together. And then I think there was some, I don't know, he might talk about it. I don't really know the exact details, but there were some problems about who owned what and production issues. But I'm glad he finally got it out. And his next book is about is a biography of Larry David, which is going to be awesome, because I'm obviously a huge fan of Larry David. So I'm really excited about that. So shout out to Console Wars, of course. For me, I'm not playing anything really worth talking about too much jumping back into Castlevania Rondo of Blood. I just felt like playing it. That's in the Castlevania Requiem collection. On PS4, I'm still playing Antiquity Lost. It's really not good. I don't know why I continue to play it. It's just, I wanted to know what a Kemco role-playing game was because there's so many of them and they all look the same. They look like RPG Maker role-playing games. And it's just, I don't know. I want to just beat it to get it, just to beat it, but it's really trite. It's also really badly translated. The writing's awful. And then Wintermore Tactics Club, I'm still playing, still find it incredibly charming. But I must say that the last week or so, and even more than that, I was talking to a friend of mine about this too. I just don't feel like playing anything. Like nothing's really speaking to me. It's not that I don't want to play games. Like I go through those phases every once in a while too, as everyone does. But it's just that I'm not finding the right game. But then when I was putting the show together today, I encountered a game when I was putting together the drop that I was like, wow, this game looks great. This might be the game that I'm looking for. So we'll talk about that in a little while.
This year, we've all spent way too much time worrying about, well, everything. Few of us have really had the time, energy, and bandwidth to worry about ourselves. But what if I told you that now is the time to focus on you? A great way to do so, to heighten your confidence and reinforce your dental health, is with teeth straightening for my friends at Candid. Candid has been tailor-made for the era of distance. Instead of going into a dentist or orthodontist's office, everything is done over the internet from the comfort of your own home, via licensed orthodontists with an expertise in tooth movement. Using Candid is easy. They're clear aligners that you wear throughout the day and night, custom fit to your mouth and your teeth, and designed over time to move your teeth back into proper alignment. Using their website, candidco.com, is incredibly easy. I browsed around, answered a brief questionnaire, and was told in mere moments if I was a candidate for treatment. I found it easy and intuitive. Just answer the questions honestly. Once you're approved, you'll remotely meet with an orthodontist, get your treatment plan, and remain carefully monitored from afar as you go from tray to tray and as you start seeing straighter and straighter teeth. Oh, and the orthodontist you meet with is the same one you'll meet with throughout the process, as he or she monitors you from point A to point Z. Even though the average treatment time is 6 months, you'll start seeing results far sooner than that. And Candid is far more affordable than traditional braces and many other brands of clear aligners. So do something nice for yourself, something you may have been thinking about doing for years. Now is the time, my friends, to save $75 off your Candid Starters Kit. Head to candidco.com/sacred. That's candidco.com/SACRED. And use the code SACRED, SACRED, at checkout. Again, that's candidco.com/sacred with the code SACRED to get $75 off your starter kit from Candid. Begin your journey of teeth straightening today, my friends. You'll be glad you did.
Dustin, as we do on the show, it's time to get into the news of the week. There's a lot of it this week and a huge story, as I promised, also covered on Sacred Symbols Plus, but we'll talk about it here as well, get Dustin's feedback, and also there are some updates worth talking about. Number one, in what is being described as easily one of the boldest corporate moves in the 50-year history of the gaming industry, Microsoft has purchased ZeniMax Media for a staggering $7.5 billion. ZeniMax, of course, is the parent company of publisher Bethesda, which itself is the umbrella under which 8 studios and dozens of IP exist. This marriage brings the Xbox and Bethesda-related brands into the same family, potentially isolating PlayStation gamers from future releases, though that remains to be clear. But here's what we do know. For starters, Microsoft has added the following 8 studios to its first-party roster: Bethesda GameWorks, Machine Games, Arcane, Tango Gameworks, id Software, ZeniMax Online, and 2 smaller teams with unproven track records, Alpha Dog and Roundhouse. Licenses that are now under the control of Xbox include Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Doom, and even the upcoming timed PS5 exclusives like Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. Likewise, Microsoft gets Bethesda's tech, including id's vaunted id Tech engine. Now, here's what PlayStation fans need to know, at least for now. For starters, the fate of games like Starfield, The Elder Scrolls 6, and others for PS5 is unknown. Xbox head Phil Spencer told the publication Bloomberg that, apart from Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, deals for which have already been signed with Sony, future releases from the Bethesda family outside of Xbox and PC will be decided, quote-unquote, on a case-by-case basis. However, we do know that one persistent game that Bethesda publishes across all platforms, The Elder Scrolls Online MMORPG, will continue to be supported on PlayStation platforms uninterrupted, which is the same tact Microsoft took with Minecraft when it purchased Mojang and therefore Minecraft back in 2014. Meanwhile, in a podcast with Bethesda and Microsoft leadership, Spencer said the following, quote, "At a fundamental level, our goal with every move that we make at Team Xbox is to enable you to play the games you want to play with the people you want to play with and where you want to play them," end quote. And Microsoft has also confirmed that what Bethesda already told us, they're going to run independently from Microsoft, at least for the most part. And in conversation with publication CNET, Spencer said in part, quote, It's about the culture of these teams. They're not about becoming us, end quote. Xbox's new consoles, the powerful Xbox Series X and the less powerful Xbox Series S, launch on November 10th. Xbox's first-party roster of studios now sits at 23 first-party teams. So, Dustin, at a high level, I mean, this is older news now, but we have to talk about it here. What do you make of this? Because this is all anyone really wants to talk about. We have a shit ton of letters about this. I've narrowed them down to a few that we can talk about, but what are your thoughts on this move by Microsoft? How do you feel about what it means for PlayStation, even though that's unknown? Talk to me a little bit about your feelings.
Right. Yeah, I know this is a crazy one. Like, I remember when the day this happened, like, this is one of those, you see it on Twitter and you're like, what? Like, it almost feels like a joke. But yeah, it's real, and it's definitely a power move from Microsoft. And what's interesting to me is now we're seeing a lot of conversations about like how should Sony respond and like who should Sony buy? And I guess that is a possibility, but like Microsoft is one of the, well, I don't want to say one of the only, but I guess in the gaming space, one of the only companies that could possibly afford $7.5 billion. Like, this is something I don't think Sony would have enough cash. Like, I know they made the deal cash, and I don't think that's something that Sony could even do if they wanted to do. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting going forward too, because they've kind of made clear the fact that this is not the end of studios they want to buy. I think also one of the most interesting aspects, and this is something that you and Chris covered pretty extensively on Sacred Symbols Plus, is they keep reiterating this point about playing games where you want to play them, right? And so since they keep bringing up that point, you have to imagine that we are going to see games like Starfield, Elder Scrolls, and maybe a new Fallout also come to PlayStation 5. On the same hand, we also heard Phil Spencer say that it would be a case-by-case basis on what games would be coming to other platforms. So I don't know. I don't know if they're ballsy enough to be like, hey, the next Doom game is only coming to Xbox and PC, but it's definitely a possibility. But I don't know. The way that they keep reiterating this kind of agnostic approach as far as playing where you want to play, you got to wonder if this sentiment also goes beyond the Bethesda games. Like, is it possible that if they're really going to be true about this mantra, that Halo Infinite could come to PlayStation? I don't know. It seems like a weird thing for them to keep saying.
Well, we have a letter from Alex Shute that I think allows us to get a little deeper into this. He says, hi, Colin and Chris. It's not Chris on the other side, but you don't know that, Alex. He says, the news has broken that Microsoft has secured ZeniMax and therefore Bethesda Softworks and Bethesda Game Studios. How do you think this acquisition will affect the release of future Bethesda titles on Sony's hardware? Do you think Microsoft will cherry pick titles to come to PlayStation and keep the big hitters like Elder Scrolls and Fallout as Xbox exclusives? Interested to hear your takes on this. So I'm really shocked that the prevailing wisdom in some circles in games media and in games commentary seems to be that, of course, these games are going to be exclusive to Xbox. I look at it the exact opposite. I think it's obvious the way they're talking about the games and the studios and Bethesda and ZeniMax as them saying, like, this is not going to be as locked down as you think. You don't want to say that up front. You want your people to be excited about it. But when push comes to shove, it's going to be pretty shocking if a game like Starfield isn't on PlayStation 5. Which, by the way, is where most gamers in the console space will be, on PlayStation 5. So I just feel like this deal changes the chemistry for a lot of hardcore gamers, and it's a huge move by Microsoft. It's a bold move. To your point, it's an expensive move. It's a move that Sony could not afford. Sony is not big enough. Sony, or rather Bethesda's purchase price is something like 8% of Sony's market cap. I mean, this is a huge deal. Sony would have had to liquidate assets to pay for this in cash. They don't have the money to do this. So this is a move that only Microsoft can do. And it's clear that they're going to your point and to Spencer's point, they're going to continue to look for studios to buy. But this just indicates to me that they're going to become a publisher. I don't see them making this move and then saying like, we bought Bethesda and now we're going to go in the exact opposite direction, which is proprietary games. We've been talking for years about making our games playable everywhere. We talk about it in all of our stuff, but now that's totally going to change. I don't understand. There's some people, and even a couple of people that have come at me on social media in the industry where it's like, they just have really bad analysis. I could be wrong, but the analysis just it really seems to be lacking on this. Because no one can explain to me, okay, Microsoft in a much more desperate time for their Xbox brand in 2014 bought Mojang and then didn't remove it from any of its competitors. In fact, published it actively on its competitors after the fact, right? I mean, Switch came out years after this and they put it on there immediately. When you make investments this big, you need to make the money back. $7.5 billion is not going to be an amount of money that they're going to be able to make back without making their games as ubiquitous as possible, especially because we already know that Game Pass is losing them money, and now it's going to lose them even more money. The calculus to me is, do they want to grab people and get them on Game Pass and get them on Xbox hardware? Of course. But the other calculus to me is, by making something like Starfield available on PlayStation 5, it makes your stuff more compelling, and here's what I mean by that. They can say like, okay, Starfield comes out day X 2023. It's going to be available on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. If you want to play it in an Xbox Series X or PC, just give us a $10 subscription. You can come play it in Game Pass along with 1,000 other games. Or you can pay us $70 on PlayStation 5 and buy the game there. To me, that's like a huge boon for them. And it's a boon that does not exist if you don't draw that contrast, right? You have to actively draw that contrast. And I was surprised that they didn't do that more actively with Minecraft, but with a $7.5 billion investment, they're going to do it with these games. And a lot of analysts in quotes have been saying, well, it's so funny how everyone's reacting to this. If Sony bought Bethesda, people would be reacting a lot differently. It's like, no shit, because they're two different companies that have two different mantras. If Sony bought Bethesda, I would be positive they wouldn't be publishing any of their games anywhere else. But Microsoft is different. They're just a different company. They're a bigger company. They have way more money. They have way more reach. They have more platforms to support, including their PC and Windows platforms. And these games are going to find their way to as many people as possible because that seems to be their mantra. I've been saying for a couple of years now, Dustin, as you know, because you edit this show, that I think Game Pass will come to PlayStation. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I think it will happen by the end of the generation. And I think that this is one step towards it. And it's not, there's too much fanboyism caught up in all of this on either end. To me, it's just like Microsoft has just become the biggest publisher of games in the world. I mean, that's all there is to it. And they can silo it on their own platforms, but that never seemed to be that important to them. Right. So why would they do it now? It just, I don't know. I think that the greatest financial contrast is by making the games available everywhere and being like, you can be a fucking idiot and go buy Starfield for $70, or you can be smart and come buy our console, get access to everything for $10 a month. It's your choice. But here is the actual choice in front of your face. That's power. And I think that's what's going to end up happening.
See that reason there specifically you just mentioned, though, is why I personally don't think that Game Pass will come to PlayStation, simply for that reason. Game Pass as a whole is like the ultimate exclusive in the fact that, as you mentioned, it's like over and over, potentially through this next generation, people who own PlayStation 5 are going to be spending $70 on a game that they could be spending $10 subscription, along with a million other things. You have to wonder if at some point down the line, they'll be thinking, man, maybe I should just buy an Xbox with Game Pass for $35 a month, and then I don't have to spend $70 every time I want one of these games. So I don't know. I could be possible about Game Pass coming to PlayStation. If they're losing money on the service, I don't see how they would want to bring that to somewhere where they would potentially even make less.
Yeah, it's about it. I mean, you make an interesting point because they can't do both at the same time. But if Game Pass's only route to profitability, and we know for a fact that it's not profitable. First of all, it can't be profitable. And I think Microsoft has talked about how it's not profitable. They have to spend way too much money on the back end to acquire these games for it to be profitable right now. The only way you make it profitable is the Netflix kind of style of just trying to get as many people as possible to subscribe. And I think that siloing that on your hardware, it's going to limit your ability to make money and extract money. And it's, I think, more urgent than ever for them to extract money. And so the profit motive can come from maybe splitting the difference and saying, again, Game Pass on our console, a la carte availability on other hardware, will make a shit ton of money on the a la carte stuff on the other hardware. And then we can still really feed the Game Pass model as well. But it can't be understated that $7.5 billion is a massive investment. And as far as I understand, is the second biggest exchange of money for goods in gaming history. I think the only other big one is the Supercell King stuff or whatever, in like the media and the mobile space, which I think was like for a little bit more, like $8 billion.
That's so funny. I wonder if it was worth it for them to do that.
I don't know. I that's the other thing, by the way. I think that Microsoft overpaid for Bethesda and for ZeniMax. I think that they're worth a lot of money, billions of dollars. But when you think about Disney acquiring Star Wars for $4 billion 8 years ago, and Bethesda being worth almost twice that much, that's obviously that's laughable, right? So I think that they overpaid, but I think that's why Bethesda sold, or ZeniMax sold, is because like, well, if you're going to pay us $7.5 billion for a brand that might be worth $4 billion or something, all right, well, fine, then overpay for our stuff. And a lot of the stuff's not even going to be ready. By the way, the two games for PlayStation fans out there that are more partisan than I think I am, but the two nearest released Bethesda published games are going to be coming to PlayStation first. This is the ironic thing, is that Bethesda is contractually obligated to deliver Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo to PlayStation exclusively. So Microsoft is going to be publishing these games for a limited time on their competitors' hardware before it can even come to Game Pass. This is where things get really weird, and why I think that the tentacles kind of intertwining with each other point to one thing. Two companies that are going in different directions that want different things and are trying to extract them in different ways. Sony is much more reliant on hardware sales. Microsoft can withstand a bunch of losses because they have really profitable parts of Microsoft, including Azure and other things like that. But which, by the way, Sony is now using Azure. So it's just a weird situation where I feel like a lot of people are surprised that I'm so confident these games will come to PlayStation, but I just feel that way. I just feel that it's obvious. And I would be really shocked if Microsoft siloed their games off, because it's just not the way they do things. And the fact that they're letting Bethesda act autonomously tells me that it's definitely going to be that way. Otherwise, you would just fold Bethesda as a publisher and just bring the studios in. Why wouldn't you do that? You know what? Like, no one gives a shit that Tango Gameworks is being published by Bethesda. Just now, Tango Gameworks is published by Microsoft, but culturally, they're letting them stay in that family. So I think that there's a lot of reading in between the lines. If they wanted to make those games exclusive, they would have said so. And the difference between Sony making an acquisition like this and Microsoft is that difference. Sony would have said immediately, these games are exclusive to our console.
Right.
But Microsoft isn't saying that. In fact, they've been given a million opportunities to say it, and they won't. So just read between the lines. That's all. It's neither here nor there. I think it's a huge loss for Sony if they're not going to get these games anymore. But I digress.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, Colin, just because I've seen this come up a few different times, and I'm not really sure what to think of it, is that there's some speculation that Bethesda partially sold out of, I don't know if necessity is the right word, but if you look at Bethesda as a publisher in the last 5 years, things really haven't been so hot for them. Basically, like as far back as Dishonored 2, you're seeing a stream of games that, while they may be critical, well received critically, they're not doing well commercially. Like Wolfenstein 2 was supposed to be not received very well commercially. Youngblood was not good at all. Rage 2 did not do well commercially. Fallout 76, while I'm sure that still sold a lot, it was definitely a tarnish on their legacy. So they seem to be having a problem, at least on a commercial level, with their studios just selling games. And their big sellers like Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and the upcoming Starfield take so many years to make. They're so far and in between that now, after so many games that did not do well commercially, and who knows how far off Starfield is, that maybe they're hurting. And this is something that seemed like a good safety net to do.
Yeah, it could be. I did see that as well. And it does make sense from the perspective of, you're right, going back to even Fallout 4, which sold very well, but was the beginning of a critical dive as well for some of their games, especially from their Bethesda Softworks studio, kind of their home team studio. And like you said, even games that they worked with second parties, like Avalanche made Rage 2, even though they tried to give credit to others for that, for id, like it didn't work on that game. Nothing really seemed to go well for them, with the exception, to your point, of Elder Scrolls Online seems to be pretty successful commercially, but it's not enough to carry a company like that. To their credit, they really haven't shuttered any studios. They've definitely started to narrow their focus away from second parties and more internal. Because remember, Bethesda published really random shit from other teams like Brink and Wet and Hunted and all of these games back in the day that came from outside of their family. So they seem to start focusing more and more on their own IP. So it could have been a thing to save themselves. I think it was a way for them to cash out too. I mean, what I said on Sacred Symbols Plus really goes, and I'm so happy for all these guys, but you have to understand that people like Pete Hines, who are already multimillionaires, are incredibly rich now. And this is a move that Todd Howard, I mean, you'd be an idiot if you were Todd Howard and didn't do this. Todd Howard probably got tens of millions of dollars from this deal, at least, you know? So, because I'm sure they all have stock options and whatnot. So it's a big deal for them. I'm happy for the individuals because it gives them a lot of solidity and a lot of safety, which is, to your point, maybe something that they were looking for. We have some more letters from the audience here. Trent Jeffrey wrote into us, says, with Xbox's purchase of ZeniMax, I believe Capcom would be a big purchase for PlayStation. They'd have a horror series, fighting series, and a hack and slash series, which I believe would really diversify their games. Also, Capcom had 3 games on both of the PS5 showcases, so there is definitely some interest. Happy to hear your guys' thoughts and always love the show. You brought this up earlier, but I don't think the tit for tat mentality makes a lot of sense here because I think Sony has to make strategic acquisitions. I will say that Capcom's a smaller company than ZeniMax, and so if ZeniMax is for sale, then Capcom's affordable at the very least. I don't know how much they would be asking for. Sony does have a long time relationship with Capcom, and games like Street Fighter are console exclusive to PlayStation. There is a history there, but also remember that there is a history between Microsoft and Capcom as well, with series like Dead Rising, which for years were coming to Xbox kind of as a timed exclusive. How do you feel about Sony getting together with Capcom? I just don't really see. This would be interesting, but this would be this is what I don't want this to happen either, because I don't want 2 or 3 companies now to just gobble everyone up and create a bunch of like vertical monopolies because they're trying to outpace each other. I just don't know that Capcom makes a lot of sense with Sony, because Sony really should be more on the hunt for IP and then creating new teams than buying old teams. But what do you think about the opportunity for them hypothetically to buy Capcom? So
I will say this fully admitting that I'm ignorant to how a lot of these big business deals work and how, I know that obviously it's not always just cash. Sometimes there's different stock related things and payment over time or whatever. But I just don't see PlayStation being able to buy a publisher or, I guess Capcom, they're a multi-team. I don't know. Do they publish games? I'm trying to think off the top of my head as well.
Does who publish games?
Capcom.
Yeah, well, yeah, they publish their own games and then they have some external partners too.
Right, yeah. So I don't know. I don't see Sony buying one of the big boys, we'll say. I think they're probably going to go more down the route of what they've been doing, which has been working out for them as far as locking down specific games. For example, you saw Final Fantasy 16 and they saw huge success with Final Fantasy 7 Remake. And I'm sure that is a hell of a lot cheaper than buying, big teams and, multiple teams outright. So, yeah, I just don't see something like that happening.
I'm looking at Sony's financial cash holdings just on various reports here on my computer. Sony, as of June 30th of this year, had $5.2 billion in cash on hand. So if they were to do a cash deal for Bethesda, for instance, they wouldn't have even been able to afford them. And they would basically have to spend all of their money to acquire something like Capcom. Capcom has a lot of valuable IP, including some really big ones. I mean, Resident Evil is huge, and they have Monster Hunter, which is obviously climbing. Street Fighter is huge, and even smaller ones like Mega Man would be interesting for them to have. But I don't really know that Sony needs Capcom because they work together so closely anyway. Why buy the cow when you kind of get the milk for free? To a certain extent, they're obviously paying for PlayStation exclusivity with games like Street Fighter V, but I just don't see that happening. I don't know that Capcom's for sale, especially because Capcom's experiencing such a renaissance. If Sony wanted to buy them, they would really pay a premium. If Capcom was really for sale, you would have wanted to buy them 10 years ago when they would have been dirt cheap. A similar question, though, comes from Pop Console. A lot of people are talking about Konami, and he says, hey, fellas, let's entertain the idea that Sony could acquire some Konami IP. How much cash would it take to get Metal Gear, Silent Hill, or Castlevania? I was thinking about this a lot. Those are the 3 franchises that Konami has that I think are really valuable. I would imagine that Sony, I would imagine that those IP are not worth much more than a few $100 million maybe for all three of them. I mean, that's a lot of money. But this is what I was saying on Sacred Symbols Plus. A lot of people are like, Sony should buy Konami. I'm like, Sony should in no way buy Konami. Buy the IP.
Yeah, Sony doesn't have any interest in buying health centers in Japan.
And also a really dying gaming vertical. And no one likes Konami. I mean, Konami totally destroyed themselves. So Sony would be heroic if they announced, like, we acquired Metal Gear, we acquired Castlevania, we acquired Silent Hill. We're going to start new teams to get these things going. That's much more affordable for Sony. And there are rumors, some compelling rumors, that Metal Gear is going to be exclusive to PlayStation. The Silent Hill stuff has been percolating for years. Konami and Sony have worked together closely since the 90s. There's no bad blood there. So we could see those things happening. But I think that the expansion with Sony's first party is going to come organically. And I think Jim Ryan spoke a little bit about this before the Bethesda stuff, where they want to kind of organically grow their teams. And I think that's smarter. I'll remind everyone that all signs point to the fact that Sony San Diego, the guys that make the show, have another team working there, probably working on Uncharted. This is the way that you create teams. You don't need to go buy names. I think that's what I said about WB Interactive. It's like, I don't know. Do you really need these teams? I think that it would be much wiser to take this money and invest in new teams. To Microsoft's credit, they are doing that as well. The Coalition is a totally new team. So they're trying to do both. But I think Sony needs to resist the gravitational urge to buy. And I'm sure that they are having those arguments right now.
Yeah, this Konami situation is getting kind of interesting because I'm kind of wondering at this point if, like, it's one of those, if there's smoke, there's fire situation, because we saw those Silent Hill rumors earlier. And now there's, like, a lot of people are reporting on this PS5 exclusive Metal Gear Solid remake, which I'm looking at an article now, and it's like the claim comes from YouTube channel, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I can't fully say whether or not that's a reliable enough source, but obviously it's a big enough story that it's worth some of these sites reporting on for at least a click. So it would be interesting, though. And there's definitely, to me, it feels like something's going on.
Yeah, you would think Tokyo Game Show would have been a good time to talk about some of this stuff. Tokyo Game Show is going on right now. So I think we would have probably heard about some of these things. But also, I think Sony is kind of said enough for now. They should talk about their console and then worry about the games later. But I agree with you. The smoke then fire thing is compelling. I just don't know what the sources are for this stuff. And sadly, Castlevania is always left out of those rumors, which is the IP I care most about. So we'll see what happens there. Andrew Walsh did write into us, though. Said, hey, CNC, so I got to ask, a few weeks ago, Colin, you called out Phil Spencer for maybe not being up to the job after Microsoft acquiring Bethesda. What do you got to say about Cool Uncle Philly now? I'm going to wait and see approach. First of all, I don't know if that Phil Spencer was really responsible for this deal. This is a deal that happens with business people. Phil Spencer is not that. Phil Spencer is basically the CEO of the brand. So he's obviously going to be heavily involved, but he has a lot of different things to worry about every day, not just acquisition. So this is happening with other people. I don't know that you want to give Phil all the credit for that. I did say that about Phil Spencer, and I'm going to remain in that camp until he shows me that he can really manage things, because he's really good at marketing. He's really good at saying the right things. He's incredibly likable. I think he turned the brand around and started getting things going in the right direction with Game Pass and all of that. But let's not forget that Phil Spencer oversaw the cancellation of a number of Xbox exclusive games under his tutelage. And now he has 23 studios to manage, including all of the second party projects they have going on as well. So this is a lot. And we're going to see what Phil Spencer is really made of. We're really going to see it now, because that's a lot to manage. That's hundreds of IP to manage, dozens, if not scores, of opportunities to release your games. We could be having first and second party releases from Xbox every 2 months, starting in a couple of years. So we'll see what Phil Spencer is made of now. Because you can go out and acquire things and talk all you want, but you got to deliver the games. And this is kind of what people on the other side say when they talk to me, kind of as I'm a little more skeptical of Sony. They do make the good point that Sony does deliver the goods at the end of the day. Microsoft hasn't delivered the goods at all this entire generation. They've released almost no games of meteoric consequence at all on Xbox One. None. And there are quite a few on Sony's platform. So at the end of the day, that's what people care about, and I get that argument, so that's why I'm skeptical. How do you feel about Phil Spencer and his leadership?
I've always found the cult of Phil, I'll call it, to be really interesting, just because he has this following online amongst Xbox fans of like this guy that can do no wrong. It's especially weird because I've been to a couple of the Microsoft E3 presentations, and it's so weird because they put they have a special section for special fan tickets that they put up front, of course, for the cameras. And it's weird because they'll like chant his name when he comes out on stage, which I know that there's been some fun stuff with like Shuei Yoshida and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. He's definitely turned things around. Definitely a lot better than it used to be. But yeah, I can't really say anything other than what you've already said, other than, you know, Xbox has been, at least for me, a really disappointing platform this generation. I bought one really excited for the future and ready to buy exclusives for it. And I think that I bought like maybe 2 or 3 games on my Xbox this entire generation. It's mainly just a 4K Blu-ray player for me now, but I guess it's not completely fair because there's some games that I have played on Game Pass on my PC. But yeah, so either way, I'm still optimistic. I mean, with 23 studios, you better hope that there's a big turnaround for this generation. Like, they spent a lot of money in order to have this talent to put out games. So now is kind of where, you know, the rubber meets the road, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the proof's going to be in the pudding now. So if they can manage and juggle all of these things, I think that will be really interesting. And I think that's part of the autonomy that they're going to give to Bethesda, because I don't think they can take on more of this, especially a whole new culture of all these teams that are used to being with each other. It's a lot. I mean, this is a big acquisition. So we're going to find out what happens here moving forward. I had a couple of other questions, but we've been on this topic for a while, so I think it's time to move on to number 2. We already know that Insomniac Games' Spider-Man Miles Morales is a PlayStation 5 launch game. We've also learned that rather unfortunate news that it's also coming to PlayStation 4 on November 12th, making it cross-gen. However, we've learned a little something new about its predecessor. 2018 smash hit PS4 exclusive Spider-Man is getting the PlayStation 5 treatment and will be released there in remastered form, apparently only available to those who pre-order a specific version of Miles Morales, the so-called Ultimate Edition. Sony is calling it Spider-Man Remastered, and here's where things get tricky. If you pre-order Miles Morales on PS5, you get Spider-Man Remastered for free, but if you pre-order Miles Morales on PS4, you get Miles Morales for free on PS5, but not gain access to Spider-Man Remastered without paying an additional fee. The good news is that Spider-Man Remastered comes with all of the DLC released for the PS4 iteration of the game all in one package. However, you won't be able to share saves between the two versions, though you should of course also remember that the PS4 iterations of both Miles Morales and the original 2018 Spider-Man will be playable on PS5. Oh, and one other little tidbit about Miles Morales, it's pretty big. The game is reportedly set up to take 50 gigs on your PS5's hard drive, smaller still than Demon's Souls Remake's 66 gigs. So a lot of surprise there. We're going to talk about that stuff a little later. But what do you think of this? I read this. I had to read about 10 stories from different outlets to even understand what the hell is going on with this. This is so weird. It's not weird that they're tethering the remastered version of Miles Morales. This is very similar to what Ubisoft did with South Park, The Fractured But Whole, when they made the Stick of Truth available on PS4 only for people that pre-ordered the game. It wasn't available to buy until a couple of years later, people might recall. So Sony's doing something similar here, and I'm not really that aghast by that. But about how the two versions interact with each other and the cross-gen stuff, why is it so hard for the publishers to just make this as clear as day? And what does Sony really have to gain by not just saying, listen, if you own the game on PS4, you can just download it for free on PS5. It's a first-party game. It's not like they owe anyone anything, you know? And Miles Morales is still going to sell a ton of copies anyway, so I'm a little confused by all of this. But what do you make of this whole, these shenanigans with Insomniac and Sony?
Yeah, this whole thing with this upgrade has been really confusing. And what's interesting to me is that there's definitely been some misinformation, just because I talked about this whole situation on an episode of SideQuest. I don't think it was last episode, but the one before. And what's weird is that there were people commenting and saying, oh, Insomniac said they were going to give the remaster update for free. And then I was like, that doesn't sound right. And then it turns out they're not. So I don't know. This is what's interesting is that like Microsoft, I think, had the right move in order to brand their upgrade situation. So the messaging is definitely really unclear.
Yeah, I don't. Why is it so hard? I just don't understand why it's so hard. It's not hard. It's not hard at all. They make things so difficult. It's not only Sony, but other publishers. We saw this recently with 505, with Control. I feel like you got to just kind of eat it a little bit on the monetary side, especially if you're a first party with a console coming out, just to make your marketing crystal clear and to give people compelling reasons to play your games. Miles Morales being on PS4 is frankly disappointing enough for many of us. And it's something that I predicted immediately when they announced the game that it was going to be on PS4 as well. And it makes a lot of sense because you don't want to leave those 100 million people behind. You have the engine running already. But I wanted a truly next-gen Spider-Man game. We're going to have to wait until Spider-Man 2 to get that. But nonetheless, I feel like this is a confusing thing. But Joshua Gershman did write into us on Patreon. He says, hey guys, I find all of this Spider-Man PS5 business to be really confusing. For instance, I'm not at all clear if my digital version of Spider-Man PS4 will even work on my PS5. The save files not being compatible isn't a deal breaker, but this seems like another unforced Sony error to me. Would love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, even the cross-save functionality is a little weird, like, because with the cross-gen backwards compatibility, it's just like, well, if you're going to make it so difficult, I'll just play the version of the game I have, you know? Like, it's just weird. I just, when I was reading the Spider-Man stuff, I was so confused. I just didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. So hopefully they clarify and maybe even simplify and maybe even do the pro-consumer thing by letting people buy Spider-Man Remastered a la carte eventually, and of course, share their saves. But you would think these two versions of the game spoke to each other a little more intimately. As Chris brought up on the last episode, Dustin, Spider-Man was the very first game we ever saw running on a PS5. So you'd think that they would really have this, you know, Insomniac has been messing around with this for a long time, and you'd think that they would have a little bit more of an organization here.
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing for me most of all is that, like, the fact that they don't give people an option. As far as I can tell, there's no option. If you own Spider-Man on PS4, whether it's disc or digital, you cannot pay to upgrade it to the remastered version. You must buy it through the Miles Morales Special Edition. To me, it's just like, dude, give people the option to spend $20. I mean, it would be even better if it was free, just because that's kind of the way that Microsoft has been going as far as offering all of their next gen upgrades for free. But the fact that they don't even present it as an option is what feels scummy to me.
Yeah, it's a weird move with a very big game. And I wouldn't be shocked if they revisited this, but this might already be in motion. I don't know if they can really take it back at this point. We'll see. Number 3. We can finally put to rest what was never going to happen anyway. PlayStation 5 will not read PS1, PS2, or PS3 discs, nor will PlayStation 5 have access to PS3's iteration of PSN. In other words, PS5 will only play PS4 and PS5 games. Word comes by way of an interview PlayStation head honcho Jim Ryan gave to Japanese magazine Famitsu, as translated by website Silicon Era. In that interview, Ryan is asked about the full PlayStation backwards compatibility suite, to which he says in part, quote, "Unfortunately, we couldn't reach the implementation of such capabilities," end quote. Always funny to read Japanese translations. Such an outlook lines up with Ryan's generally forward-looking approach to PlayStation tech. In an interview with Games Industry International, he doubled down on PlayStation's generational approach as opposed to Microsoft's half-step with one of its consoles. This isn't a huge surprise, but still made a lot of news. I don't know why people were hanging on to this as if it was really going to happen. What do you think?
I don't know, because I don't think it definitely wouldn't be difficult to do with PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. PlayStation 3, though, with the cell processor, I mean, they're having a hard time making even an emulator on like the best PCs. We're starting to see some progress where some games are able to run, but it's been very slow going. So I definitely can see that Sony was not able to get the PS3 running properly. But honestly, I don't even know if they even messed around with it, just because, like we've seen before, Jim Ryan has such a forward-thinking approach that... and the other thing is that they have the data on these things. I'm sure that they looked at the PlayStation 2 games that they did release on PlayStation 4 and thought, no one's really buying these. No one's even really playing these. So why would we put the time and effort into, emulation when people aren't buying the games that are available to them on PS4? So I don't know. It could be the selection as well, because I think that they probably could have done more with the PS2 on PS4 catalog. But to me, it's not something that I necessarily want. I think it would be a cool thing to have. But the other thing, too, is that if you look at even just recently, like Nintendo put out the port of those 3 games, they charged $60 for it. Sony may be thinking, we're better off doing remasters and remakes and selling these games to people again instead of doing backwards compatibility.
Yeah, I think that's been part of their calculus since the PS3 era. It's easy to forget that Sony was really the first publisher to start remaking and re-releasing their games. This really, it's not to say that it never happened. I mean, obviously we had Super Mario All-Stars and others, but Sony with Sly Cooper and then God of War and then Team Ico, they were the ones that really started to kind of get this ball rolling. And then we started seeing others jumping on board, because I remember it was really controversial back then as well. But you're right, they have the data necessary. And it's worth noting that on PS4, it's the PS2 games that they did release are not bad. I mean, they released some really great games. They released Dark Cloud 2, Rogue Galaxy. So those were all from Level 5, an awesome developer. They released Media Vision's Wild Arms 3. They had great third-party partners with Rockstar. Rockstar released basically all of their PS2 games minus Manhunt and like State of Emergency. So that all the Grand Theft Auto games, the Warriors and others. And you're right. I don't think that these things lit the world on fire. So they were like, well, it's easy to, you got to not listen to it's important to listen to the minority, right? But at some point they become really loud and boisterous, and they don't really dictate the terms of how you create your console, the amount of money you put into it. And the backwards compatibility for some of these consoles might have required a few components that could have raised the price of the console or made Sony eat money, which they can't really afford to do. We know that the cost to manufacture is about $450, not the cost to bring to market. So I think they're already breaking even anyway. I think so. I would look at this and I'm just not surprised at all. I think people are really holding on to this one, but it's a nice idea to have a whole ubiquitous PlayStation thing, but it's not going to happen. You know, it's not going to happen.
And the other thing is they view PlayStation Now as their backwards compatibility option. And I mean, it is unfortunate. I have to agree with what Chris has said on this show, is that the streaming on PlayStation Now is one of the worst that this industry offers compared to, I guess I haven't tried xCloud fully yet, but as far as like other streaming options, PlayStation Now, it looks so bad. There's so much latency. And that's one of the things I'm hoping that, you know, with PlayStation 5, we see a PlayStation Now 2.0 with a streaming service that's actually comparable to something like Stadia or something like that. So it's interesting since that's how they view what backwards compatibility even is for them. And it's just such a poor solution.
Yeah. And it's shocking too. I was reading some Twitter threads where I don't expect everyone to know everything about games. And some people have come recently. They're not into the ecosystem or whatever, but I think some people forget that Sony was like really one of the first players in the streaming space too. And they still haven't figured it out. They bought Gaikai 8 years ago, right? Like, this isn't a new thing. They definitely saw what was going to happen, but they've not figured out how to do it. It's just really weird. You know, that PlayStation Now is, we're going to talk a little bit about PS Now later, but I don't think it's coming together the way Sony wants to. And I think it's more important than ever that it comes together for them. Not because of the backwards compatibility stuff, but because of Game Pass. But we'll talk about that in just a little while. Let's move on, though, in the meantime, Dustin, to number 4. PlayStation 5 launch game and PS console exclusive Godfall has officially gone gold, making it the first major launch release for the upcoming console to have crossed the finish line. Word comes by way of an official Twitter account for the game, which noted on September 17th that the game is done. An action RPG built on Unreal 4 and being published strangely by Gearbox. Godfall is under development by Counterplay Games, and it's their first major project. I can't get excited about this game. I don't know why. I just think it looks so generic. I just can't get excited about it. Maybe I'm not seeing the right stuff about it. Maybe it'll really hook me when I play it, because I'll definitely get it. But I don't know. Are you into this game at all?
No.
Is anyone into this game?
I continually am amazed how it felt like this entire summer, every single stream, it's like, hey, here's Godfall again. And I'm like, I'm so fucking tired of seeing Godfall. And they even did that. Was it on one of the PlayStation streams where they had like this like quick, like 1 minute long thing? Do you remember that?
I don't know. On one of the state of plays or whatever.
Yeah, well, it was either a Sony thing, maybe it was the Gamescom, and I'm like, again, we don't need to see any more Godfall. But yeah, I'm with you. It looks really generic. I thought that the animation work did not look too pleasing either. But I mean, it's a launch game, and so I'm sure that it will sell a lot of copies. But who knows? Maybe it'll be great. Hopefully.
Yeah, I hope it is great. We'll see what Counterplay is made of. But congratulations to them for hitting gold. They don't have to worry about getting that game out. Launch game dev cycles are amongst the most stressful. I know Insomniac told that story about Fall of Man showing it at E3 where they were calculating a 50% chance that the game would crash when they were showing it on the stage. So, and it didn't, thankfully, for them. Number 5, at Tokyo Game Show, publisher Square Enix revealed the release date of the eagerly anticipated remaster of the original Nier game, Nier Replicant. It comes to PlayStation 4 on April 22nd, 2021. Now, the story behind the Nier series is a little complicated. It's actually a spin-off and continuation of the Drakengard franchise that began on PlayStation 2 in 2003. A sequel, Drakengard 2, was released in 2005 on PlayStation 2. Both of those games were made by a now-defunct Japanese team named Kavia. Kavia's final game of consequence was Nier, which came to PlayStation 3 in 2010. Like Drakengard 1 and 2, Nier was a hack-and-slash action RPG, and it gained a small following. Nier was followed by Drakengard 3 on PlayStation 3 in 2014, made by another Japanese team named Access. Access is best known for its porting and spin-off work in the Ace Combat and Mega Man franchises, though it's also the team behind the cult 2010 hit Deadly Premonition. Anyway, while they went back to port work, Platinum Games picked up the Drakengard mantle on behalf of Square Enix, resulting in 2017's critical and commercial hit Nier Automata. Nier Replicant is a remastered edition of that 2010 game that falls between Drakengard 2 and 3 and takes place long before the events of the beloved Automata. The release date for Replicant comes on the back of word from Square Enix that Automata is precariously close to 5 million units sold, sitting comfortably at 4.85 million units. That's a huge success for a JRPG. I know you're a huge fan. Just take it away, Dustin. Talk to me.
Yeah, so it's weird. I feel a little odd about this game, just because this remake. Well, I mean, they're saying it's a remaster, but from the footage we saw today, it looks closer along the lines of a remake in that the combat looks very different. I personally have not played the original Nier that was on PlayStation 3. Just because I did not get into the franchise until the more recent Nier Automata. But what worries me a little bit about this release is the developer is a company called Toy Logic, and they don't seem to have any kind of notable release under their belt. So it was a little odd for me to see Square Enix have this huge, successful game with Nier Automata and then have this relatively unknown company, Toy Logic, make for right now, this is the latest follow-up. It's not necessarily a true sequel, but this is the next thing that they're releasing. So it would be, a really unfortunate thing that they have this really high potential in this franchise only to follow it up with a total dud. Now, I am staying optimistic. What we saw today from the TGS stream looked pretty good. So I don't know. We'll see what happens when it actually comes out.
Yeah, I'm reading about this Toy Logic company now. It seems like they've done a lot of work for Nintendo.
Right.
It seems like they did some contract work for Brawl and Kid Icarus Uprising. And then it seems like they did the last gen ports of The Evil Within for Bethesda, for Tango, and then they worked on Dragon Quest XI content. So it seems like they're just for hire. So I agree with you. It is a little bit of a weird one. If they're remastering it straight up, it's not that weird. But if they are remaking parts of the game, it's a little stranger because it doesn't seem like they actually make anything themselves, or very few things. So we'll see. Have all the hope in Toy Logic. What is the difference between Nier, Gestalt? There's like another. I can't really understand any of this stuff.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yeah. So I'll try to speak to this as best as I can because I haven't played them. But to my understanding, in Japan, there is the two versions. One of them you play as like this burly dad, and the other one you play as like a more young anime looking guy. And I don't know if that's also a family member, but basically the two versions of the game are very similar, but you play as a different main character. In the United States, they only released the one version where you play as the dad. So
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of like a Pokemon like Red and Blue situation, to my understanding, where it's pretty much the same, but there are different elements. So
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. April next year. Number 6, you may be disappointed to hear that CD Projekt's hyped up upcoming open world RPG Cyberpunk 2077 will be shorter than 2015's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which was a notoriously dense game. The reason, according to a CD Projekt live stream is relayed by IGN, it's because a vast majority of the millions of people who played The Witcher 3 didn't make it to the end. Senior quest designer Patrick K. Mills said the following, quote, "We do know that the main story run in Cyberpunk 2077 is slightly shorter than The Witcher 3 because we got a lot of complaints about Witcher 3's main story just being too long. Looking at the metrics, you see tremendous numbers of people played the game really far but never made it to the end. I'm one of those guys. We wanted you to see the full story, so we did shorten the main story, but we have lots to do," end quote. IGN notes that the website How Long to Beat pins Witcher 3's story at more than 50 hours to complete, with 100%ing the game requiring an absurd 170 plus hours. Cyberpunk 2077 is due out on PlayStation 4 on November 20th, and the game will be coming to PlayStation 5 natively in 2021. I'm thrilled to hear this news, but I can hear the shrieking in the role-playing game community about this because there's some sort of currency confusion about what matters the most, quality or length. We're still in this mode where game length matters more than quality. I totally disagree. How do you feel about Cyberpunk and CD Projekt kind of coming out and overtly, I think, managing expectations that maybe Cyberpunk's going to be a much shorter game?
So what I'm wondering based on this live stream is that were they specific that it's the main story is shorter and not the entire game?
Yeah, they do. If you read the full Patrick K. Mills quote, he does go on to say that there's like a lots of other stuff to do in the game. And it's unclear how much more of that or less of that exists.
This makes sense to me because what's really been up front and center with Cyberpunk is like this, like Night City is the main thing. Look at all these different things you can do. Look at how you can create your character and play the game the way you want to, right? So for me, a shorter main story seems to make sense because for me, like, I'm excited to just live and play in this world and do like a million different wacky side quests and do all kinds of different things. I honestly, like, I've seen so much stuff on Cyberpunk and I could not tell you what the actual main storyline is even about. I may have had a better idea closer to E3 when I was actually watching these trailers, but I know it's like Keanu Reeves is in there and stuff like that. So it's weird because for me, the main story isn't even what I'm excited about for Cyberpunk really at all. So, and it is interesting what they said about The Witcher, how a lot of people didn't finish it, because I'm sort of in that same boat, is that I keep going back to The Witcher maybe almost like once a year since it came out. And what I keep picking up at the same point. And it feels like I just keep playing this game and the main story never ends. So I personally am glad that the main story will be shorter. But yeah, I'm guessing there will be a lot of people that see this and instantly they just see Cyberpunk shorter and then are upset, when I'm guessing in reality that this game, as far as total content, will be even longer than The Witcher 3.
God, I hope not, but you could be right. It's funny because the main story in The Witcher 3 was not my problem. I don't really even remember what the story's about, but I just remember being so overwhelmed by content in that game. I was like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. How many question marks can possibly be on this map? And then you do one and then 17 more pop up.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so OCD with stuff like that where I'm like, I can't operate in this game. You know, I just can't operate. I remember so well playing it in a hotel in Atlanta when we were at MomoCon in 2015. And I just was becoming so overwhelmed with it. So I'm personally pleased to hear that Cyberpunk will be shorter. Although I must admit, I'm not that excited about Cyberpunk. It's not one of those games I'm like really eager to play. It's just not. I don't know why, but it's just not. I wasn't excited about The Witcher at all, by the way, until I went and played it at an event right before it came out too. So it could be a similar situation. I don't know what's going to happen. So again, November 20th, right after PS5 comes out. Number 7, a new Transformers game has been quietly revealed and it's coming to PlayStation 4 very, very soon. It's called Transformers Battleground and it launches on PS4 on October 23rd. Battleground is a turn-based strategy game based in the Transformers universe, and it frankly looks pretty crude graphically. It appears that the owner of the Transformers IP, Hasbro, has teamed up with the publisher Bandai Namco to make the game, which is being developed by a team called Outright. Outright terms themselves as a family-friendly game dev, and they seem to work exclusively on licensed products. I think the gameplay of this looks really cool. A lot of people are pointing at Advance Wars, but it does look really crude. Hasbro seems to be spinning some of these games out. We know that a G.I. Joe game's coming out this fall as well, so not a huge surprise that we're seeing Transformers. Are you a Transformers guy at all? You're a little young for that.
I mean, what Transformers is kind of interesting because my dad kind of showed it to me because he grew up with a lot of that stuff. Just since my dad's, a lot younger than, we'll just say, a lot of other people's dads my age. So he kind of instilled in me some of that. But I don't know. I watched some gameplay from this. There was like this really random YouTube channel that had like 1,000 subs that had this full 10-minute gameplay that no one else seemed to have. And it's weird. It looks like XCOM almost. And then you mentioned Advance Wars too. So I just don't really know who this game is for. I mean, I guess it could be for the older people that grew up with Transformers. I just don't see this as a game that kids would want to play, but I don't know. Maybe it's not for them.
It kind of bums me out because Hasbro doesn't seem to be putting any effort into their games. And if you don't put effort into the products you're putting out, then people aren't going to care. It's the same way I feel about that G.I. Joe game. I just hope that they're good, because what's the point otherwise? If you want to attract new fans and a new generation of people to be interested, then you got to give them good stuff. And the toys are so good. Transformer toys are still really popular. They're releasing stuff all the time. The only reason I know that is because I'm tuned into Hasbro for G.I. Joe. So I see all the other stuff that they announce. So we'll see if this game's any good. I'm going to pick it up. It's been a few years since there's been a Transformers game. I do believe, if I recall, that Platinum made a Transformers game with Activision maybe 5 years ago. I think that might be the last Transformers game of relevance.
A lot of people really like that game. It was supposed to be really good. And it was free on PlayStation Plus at one point.
It was. And that was the same time Activision also published a TMNT game, which I also think Platinum did, if I recall. I don't know if that came out before or after. It was a while ago, but we'll keep an eye out for that. Transformers Battleground, October 23rd. This one's interesting. I want to see what you think of this. Number 8. The next entry in the niche favorite strategy RPG franchise Disgaea has been revealed, and yes, it's coming to PlayStation 4, though it's unclear if it'll be coming to Western PS4s. The game is called Disgaea 6 Defiance of Destiny, and it's due out in 2021, making it the first mainline Disgaea release since Disgaea 5 came to PlayStation 4 back in 2015. What's strange here, however, is that the game was announced for PS4 and Switch in Japan, but only Switch outside of Japan. When website Gamatsu followed up with publisher NIS America about this, PR said in part, quote, "At this time, we don't have further comments on whether this title will release on other platforms outside of Switch," end quote. This is an extremely peculiar move considering the franchise's deep PlayStation heritage, though it could be part of a timed exclusivity deal Nintendo made with NIS outside of Japan or some other weird business quirk. Disgaea began back on PlayStation 2 with 2003's Disgaea Hour of Darkness, and there are about a dozen mainline and spin-off games in the series. All has been quiet for the last 5 years, however, indicating perhaps falling popularity. I've never been a fan of Disgaea. I just don't like it. And you'd think that I would like it because it's a turn-based strategy RPG. I'm not into the whole stacking characters and like doing a billion points of damage and shit. I'm just like, I can't deal with this. So it's not for me, but I know a lot of people really love it. But isn't that weird that the game is coming to PS4 and Switch in Japan and only Switch outside of Japan? You have to assume that this is timed, right?
Right. I mean, it reeks to me of an exclusivity deal because they wouldn't put all that time into localizing it only. I mean, it wouldn't make sense unless there was a deal for them to not release it on multiple platforms. So the thing that's weird to me is why wouldn't you just say so? Like, have you heard of an exclusivity deal where they're like, it's part of the deal that they don't talk about the deal? That just doesn't really seem to make sense.
It reminds me a little bit of the whole Tomb Raider stuff with Microsoft and Square Enix. Remember that? Where there was like exclusive, console exclusive, timed exclusive, and everyone's like, I don't think Tomb Raider's really exclusive. And then there was like this whole year battle over that. That's the only thing I can really think of where it's similar. My assumption is Nintendo bought this as a timed exclusive, and the only reason it's not a timed exclusive in Japan is because maybe the audience there, which is Disgaea's biggest audience, just won't tolerate it not being on PS4. I assume it'll come eventually. It's just weird because Disgaea is so PlayStation centric. There are even Vita iterations of the game. So it is a little strange, but I assume that Nintendo just scooped this one up as they've been doing right under Sony's nose. But Disgaea 5 probably didn't sell very well because Disgaea has been pretty quiet for a while with Nippon Ichi, the studio that makes it. All right, let's see here. Number 9. Famed game designer Michel Ancel has somewhat unceremoniously retired from game development, leaving 2 of his long gestating games in various states of uncertainty. Ancel is famous for his work running from the mid-90s until just 4 or 5 years ago and is the creator of both the Rayman and Beyond Good and Evil franchises, though he also did licensing work too, all on behalf of Ubisoft over a 20-plus year career. But his last 2 projects, one with Ubisoft and one without, have been accused of being vaporware after having been announced years ago and silently trudging along. Most commentators feel more optimistic about Beyond Good and Evil 2, the follow-up to 2003's beloved Beyond Good and Evil, first officially announced in 2017, but bouncing around various states of development for more than a decade before that. The game still doesn't have a release date or even target platforms. Ubisoft itself posted an update on Beyond Good and Evil 2's website to assure players that it's still being worked on. You should feel far less optimistic about Wild, however, the one-time vaunted PS4 exclusive being funded and published by Sony. It was first announced back in 2014 by French team Wild Sheep Studio. As for Ancel, well, he's leaving gaming to go work with Wildlife, and we wish him well. This is a weird saga with Michel Ancel, Wild, and Beyond Good and Evil 2. It seemed obvious that he didn't have control of these projects because, and maybe just totally disinterested in them because they both just fell into development hell. My assumption is we will see Beyond Good and Evil 2, but we're not going to see Wild. How do you feel about these 2 games and Ancel's contributions and him leaving the industry? I mean, obviously, especially with Rayman, I mean, it's an iconic franchise.
Right. Yeah. This whole Beyond Good and Evil 2 situation is so strange to me because I know that there's like a cult following behind the original, but the way that Ubisoft went and made such a big deal about Beyond Good and Evil 2 was just kind of surprising to me. And the fact that not only that they're making it, but the fact that it seems like the scope of the game is so much bigger than you would have expected from, a follow-up to I don't know. Do we consider Beyond Good and Evil like having a cult following, or is it much bigger than I think?
No, it's not much bigger than you think at all. If it was, then they would have made a sequel much more quickly.
Right.
So the proof's in the pudding there.
I don't know. I always find it weird when developers have like we're doing a shared development with the community. Join us on this website. To me, there's something about that always is off to me. And it's funny because of the games. I guess I can only think of one other example that's so obscure where Mega Man Legends 3, they did a thing like this where they wanted community input, and then the game eventually just faded away and got canceled.
That's right. I forgot about that there was a whole feedback period for that game.
Yeah. Well, and apparently I remember Capcom saying like, well, there wasn't a lot of interest in the feedback and the development with the community aspect, so we're canceling it. And so I don't know if that would be the case for Beyond Good and Evil 2, but it's weird when I did a video about this. I don't know I think it was on my channel a while back. And it's weird because it was clear they were really excited about this project for a while, posting regular updates with videos on their YouTube channel. And now it's just gone totally quiet. So yeah, it's weird that they would go out of their way to be like, hey, it's still being worked on. But I don't know. I wouldn't cross your fingers or keep your hopes up for this game because to me, it just spells like a cancellation, but who knows? Maybe they are sticking to it.
Yeah, we'll see. Beyond Good and Evil reminds me a lot of Shenmue, where it has a really small vocal community that wants it back. And I bought Beyond Good and Evil on Xbox when it came out back in 2003. I liked it. It's surprising that it has such an audience. I just don't really get the affinity for it. There are so many better games from that generation and so many better games from 2003, especially. I mean, that's a pretty good year for games. So a little surprising. So we'll see what happens, but I would imagine Wild is gone. The game, for people that don't remember Wild, it was supposed to be like where you can play as like any animal, and it was weird. I was actually at Gamescom when it was announced, and it was weird even then. All right, number 10, Bandai Namco, a Japanese publisher not well known for acquiring outside teams, has done just that. Bandai Namco is now the owner of Canadian developer Reflector Entertainment, though, according to Games Industry International, it's unclear what the publisher paid for the honor. Well, Reflector's IP, Unknown 9, is what Bandai Namco seems to be after, along with the 120 employees that work at Reflector. Unknown 9 is interesting because it's designed from the ground up to be a so-called quote-unquote cross-media, meaning that apart from games, there are other opportunities to expand the brand. As the website notes, Unknown 9 isn't only getting a game called Awakening, but there are comics, a novel, and even podcasts dedicated to the world they're building. It's also worth noting that it is unlikely to be Bandai Namco's final external Western acquisition, as the publisher has been vocal about wanting to geographically diversify its publishing, with 50% of its launches coming from outside of Japan. I think this is why they were so interested in and continue to be interested in working with Supermassive as well. So not that Bandai Namco has a lot of purchasing power, but someone else is on the prowl now for studios too. So we'll see if Bandai Namco scoops anyone up notable. I must admit that I never even heard of this Unknown 9 game until this happened, and then I went and looked it up. It sounds cool. I like this idea. It reminds me a little bit of what was that Xbox game that Remedy did?
Quantum Break.
Where they tried to do like a TV show and shit like that.
Yeah, I felt like they didn't. It was an interesting idea, but I Quantum Break, I thought it was weird to just be like playing a game for a little while, and then it's like, oh, now I'm gonna sit and watch a TV show for 20 minutes. Just was like an interesting idea that I felt like wasn't implemented well. But I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting to be like, we're creating an IP that we're gonna do a million different things for, an unproven IP. So it seems weird to me to go so big right off the bat, because what if it sucks? Then you have all this other, not only do you have a failed game, but you also have a failed comic book series, a failed podcast, you know what I mean? So
yeah, sure.
It's weird though too, just because I saw when this got announced, I remember seeing some buzz on Twitter, but I just can't get excited about what's the word I'm looking for? Cinematic trailers, right?
Sure.
I was like, I watched the trailer. I'm like, I don't fucking know what this game's about. I don't know anything about this game still. Like, what is the experience like playing it? Even that would have been interesting. But yeah, so interesting to go so big right off the bat. But apparently Bandai Namco sees something in it. So
yeah, the price might be right. It is another like cow milk free situation.
Right.
They might have been able to just publish this game, but it could be that they saw or see something in this IP where they're like, we might as well get in on the ground floor, that maybe the price is right. These guys might be eager to sell. So anyway, Bandai Namco growing, and I'll always root for Bandai Namco because of the Tales series. Always want them to do well. Number 11, the many Yakuza fans that listen to this podcast will be very pleased to hear the following. Sega is developing a live action film based on the franchise. Word comes by way of publication Variety, which reports that Sega and its producers are still hunting for scriptwriters and that the project is in its earliest stages. 1212 Entertainment, which is helping to handle the adaptation, noted in a press release the following in part, quote, Yakuza offers us a new playground in which to set compelling stories with complex characters in a unique environment that audiences have rarely seen before. The saga of Kazuma Kiryu has a built-in cinematic appeal, a mix of kinetic action with bursts of comedy, multiple converging storylines, and a gripping journey towards redemption, end quote. The Yakuza series, known as Ru ga Gotoku in Japan, began on PlayStation 2 in 2005, with a sequel launching on PS2 a year later. Both games eventually migrated westward, and the franchise continued in 2009 and 2010, with Yakuza 3 and 4 on PS3. The series has since continued from there, staying native to PlayStation, but slowly sprouting off to other platforms. The next Yakuza game, Like a Dragon, comes to PS4 on November 13th. It's already out in Japan. Are you a Yakuza fan? I don't know that about you.
So I feel like I should be. Like, I started Yakuza 0 and I really liked what I was seeing, but they're so fucking long and it's such a commitment. Like, I'm pretty sure, let me look on how long to beat. These games, though, like, there's, 7 of them now, including Yakuza 0. And then there's
some spin-offs as well.
There's the 7th game, which is actually the 8th game. And so, yeah, the idea of the film, though, is so interesting to me because the reason, or at least one of the main reasons I feel like fans really like these games are how goofy they can be. Like, just with totally oddball, wacky stuff. Like, you're beating people up and money is flying out. And it's very campy, right? So I just don't know if that's going to translate well to a film. And I was looking up the company that is working on this. Let's see, what was it here? 1212 Entertainment.
Yeah.
And the most recent thing I saw that they worked on was the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie, which I don't know if people liked or didn't like, but so it was kind of a weird transition for them, but I don't know.
My assumption here is that they saw such meteoric success with Sonic in film now that they're just trying to explore other things. My assumption is this will never get made, but it is nonetheless announced they are on the hunt for screenwriters, so we'll see what happens. And yeah, I think Sega's just hungry for more money because Sonic has been such a huge hit for them. Number 12 is a wrap up, Dustin. So let's get through some of these games here that are coming to PlayStation platforms. Website Gamatsu reports that RPG Starstruck Hands of Time is coming to PS4 in 2021. Visual novel Necopara Volume 4 is coming to... I don't know why it says coming to Switch. It should be PS4. I wrote it, so... PS4 this December. Strategy RPG Brigandine, The Legend of Runesaria is coming to PS4 on December 10th. That Brigandine game looks awesome. People should go check it out. MMORPG Bless Unleashed is coming to PS4 on October 22nd. Dungeon crawling action game Dungreed is coming to PS4 on October 27th. Side-scrolling strategy RPG Fallen Legion Revenants is coming to PS4 on February 16th of next year. Arcade game Clockwork Aquario has been delayed on PS4 out of 2020 and will now come out in 2021. Arcade shooter R-Type Final 2 is coming to PS4 in the spring of 2021. Interactive movie game Death Come True has been delayed and will no longer come to PS4 this October. Frenetic arcade game Supermarket Shriek is coming to PS4 on October 23rd. Turn-based RPG Orange Blood is coming to PS4 on October 1st. That game also looks really good. Arcade shooter Mighty Goose is coming to PS4 in 2021. RPG sim Potion Permit is coming to PS4 in 2021. Farming game Kataria Fables is coming to PS4 in 2021. Action game Poison Control is coming to PS4 in early 2021. Crime-centric strategy game Empire of Sin is coming to PS4 on December 1st. That game also looks pretty cool. Platformer Yestermorrow is coming to PS4 on November 5th. The insane Katamari Damacy reroll is coming to PS4 on November 20th. Robot brawling game Override 2 Super Mech League is coming to PS4 later this year. Action platformer Balan Wonderworld is coming to PS4 and PS5 on March 26, 2021. And dirt bike racing game MXGP is coming to PS4 and PS5 on December 10th. Website Push Square reports surprise hit open world shark game Maneater is coming to PS5 and will receive a free upgrade for PS4 owners. I gotta play that game still. It looks really cool. Horror game Remothered Broken Porcelain's release date on PS4 has been moved up from October 20th to October 13th. And mysterious indie game Jet for PS4 and PS5 has been delayed out of 2020 and into 2021. The official PlayStation blog reports that pirate action RPG King of Seas is coming out by the end of the year on PS4, and Neo 2's long-awaited second expansion, Darkness in the Capital, is coming to PS4 on October 15th. Website IGN reports that Crash Bandicoot 4, due out in October, is getting local competitive and co-op multiplayer. And finally, website Eurogamer reports, or confirms rather, that horror game Observer System Redux will be a PlayStation 5 launch game, due out on November 12th. So that is everything. Now, Dustin, for the first time ever, you get to partake in a great Sacred Symbols tradition, which is reading the games that have come out this last week on various PlayStation platforms. Tradition dictates that Chris goes first, and so tradition dictates that you will go first.
Man, a lot of pressure here because I edit these, and so there's usually... I make them a lot smoother, I think, than people realize. So we'll see, because I feel like I'm not very good at reading aloud in general, and so now I'm
do you want me to read them myself?
No, I want to participate. I just am giving the warning that it may be a train wreck. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, so. Chris is dyslexic, so he has some problems reading. So that's why you do a lot of the editing. I would be surprised if you edit many of mine, but maybe you do. I don't know. I don't presume to know what your system is. So.
Let's go ahead and give this a shot.
All right.
13 Sentinels Aegis Rim for PlayStation 4. Vanillaware, the storytellers behind Odin Sphere and Dragon's Crown, craft a sci-fi mystery epic spanning 13 intertwining stories with 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. With a Metacritic score of 87, 13 Sentinels has won the praise of critics all over the world. Uncover the truth and delve into a 2D side-scrolling adventure featuring gorgeous art and environments. Then, battle the kaiju in a fast-paced top-down combat. Customize the Sentinels with an arsenal of mech suit weaponry and fight to defend humanity.
That was great.
I did.
What was wrong with your
It'll get worse. I'm telling you, that was like a fluke. So
All right.
Who knows though? Maybe I'm going to be on a streak. We'll see.
Fair enough. That game looks great. It's definitely very different for a Vanillaware game. If you're a fan like I am of the franchise or of the studio, I'm a huge Dragon's Crown fan. I love that game. So I'm going to check that out at some point, but not immediately. Big Bobby Car, the big race, comes to PS4. Whiz across a world full of adventures in your Big Bobby Car. Meet other Big Bobby cars. What the fuck is a Big Bobby car? Complete tricky missions and discover hidden treasures until the day comes when you win the annual big race and whip it up on the winner's podium as new champ.
I like that Big Bobby Car is capitalized. Like this is a title of some kind of machine, a vehicle of some sort in this Big Bobby Car universe. So
yeah, I'm looking. Oh, so this is it's like a toy that you ride on.
Oh,
I see. And it looks like it's maybe German.
The Germans are always thinking of weird shit. So
yeah, some of the stuff not so good.
Yeah,
the Germans think of. All right, up to you.
All right, Castle Storm 2 comes to PS4. Aim your catapults, command your troops, bloody the battlefield. Castle Storm 2 levels up gaming's greatest genre mishmash with ruthless destruction powered by Unreal 4, plus a whole new metagame of strategic tactical conquest. The heroes of the kingdom confront the vile forces of the undead, and you'll plot your path to triumph for both sides in 2 epic story-driven campaigns, but not without some hands-on chaotic carnage and delightful devastation.
I remember when those guys came to IGN to show me the original Castle Storm. That's Zen, I think, makes those games. The guys that make Zen Pinball.
Oh, okay.
And it was too much for me. It's an interesting game. It was much more of its time back then. I'll look into this Castle Storm 2. Commandos 2 HD Remaster comes to PS4. Relive the real-time tactics masterpiece that defined the genre like no other. Originally developed by the legendary Pyro Studios, Commandos 2 HD Remaster is a true homage to one of gaming's most celebrated masterpieces. Experience Commandos 2 Men of Courage like never before in high definition with reworked controls, UI, and tutorial. Take control of an elite group of commandos who must venture deep into enemy territory and utilize their combined expertise to complete a series of notoriously demanding missions set in World War II. Go covert into various environments based on authentic World War II locations and lead your team of commandos against overwhelming odds, operate covertly, and turn the tide of war.
Do Not Feed the Monkeys comes to PlayStation 4. A digital voyeur simulator where you watch strangers through surveillance cameras, invade their privacy, and witness the most intimate moments, but don't interact with the subjects. Anything could happen if you dare feed the monkeys.
Yeah,
I feel like I just had a stroke of like, I don't know, where did the monkeys come into the, are we what kind of situations are we witnessing here?
I don't
know. The most
it's
intimate moments. Is this what is this game rated?
I'm looking at the trophies now. Yeah, I don't know. This game sounds a little unsettling, no doubt about it. Not really interested in it. Well, anyway. Donut Break comes to PS4. Donut Break is an arcade game that lets the user knock out pastries with a unique arcade paddle and ball. Unique animated levels, mini bosses, and power-ups to collect as you progress through the levels. 30 levels to compete in and battle mini bosses on your way to victory. Single-player fun and arcade-style entertainment.
Feather comes to PS4. Feather is a relaxing bird simulation perfect for unwinding. Whether solo or with your other online players, Feather will have you become a bird and explore stunning locations as you soar through the skies. No enemies, no combat, no threats. Just peaceful flight by yourself or with other birds. Yes, the passive multiplayer in Feather allows you to join a flock and enjoy flying with others, or just relax on your own. Explore a vast open world, finding new songs in every nook and cranny. Immerse yourself in a beautiful island that responds to your presence with a hum, tone, and rhythm beyond human comprehension.
Bird simulator. All right. To each his own. Fight of Animals comes to PS4. Animal memes such as Power Hook Dog, Mighty Fox, Magic Squirrel, and more are now become fighters. That's what it says. Simple controls and funny animals and exciting battles. Choose your favorite animal and join the fight. Players are able to fight through arcade mode, become the king of animals. That's all one sentence, by the way.
And I like to point out, too, that there were 3 exclamation points at the end of one sentence and then 2 on the others. Yes. And then one with just 1. So I don't know what's
Sony
going on
doesn't
here.
give a flying fuck when anyone says about their games. They don't care at all.
Now let's see. This one is Ginga. Ginga Force comes to PS4. Take flight and fight over the Earth-like planet of Saventia and its scarce resources of Septonium, a vertical shoot-'em-up at its core with an added focus towards immersive storytelling. Follow the story of Alex and Margaret, two exceptional pilots who must battle against various deadly bosses, each with their own powerful mechas.
All right. Going Under comes to PS4. Going Under is a satirical dungeon crawler about exploring the cursed ruins of failed tech startups. As an unpaid intern in the dystopian city of Neo Cascadia, you'll wield office junk as weaponry as you make your way through the offbeat procedural dungeons beneath your company campus.
Gorst comes to PS4. Intense arena combat set deep inside the heart of darkness. Discover the story of Gorst alone or battle with up to 4 friends in local multiplayer. Born from a womb eye, you discover a world seething with challenges created by an unknown power. For what purpose were you created? Uncover the truth of the Gorst.
That's G-O-R-S-D in all caps, by the way.
Gorst, yeah.
All right. Gothic murder adventure that changes destiny comes to PS4. Can she, a maid in an earl's household, change the fate of the lord she serves? An original mystery game developed by Orange, creator of many mystery ADVs such as the Jake Hunter detective story series. In each chapter, tragedy will befall our heroine unless the player can stop them. There are 5 incidents to solve.
Man, you got to give a shout out to Jake Hunter detective stories. Just
for sure.
Have you played Jake Hunter?
No.
No, me neither.
No, I've never heard of Jake Hunter.
Jet Set Knights comes to PS4. The king has gone away for a while, making the kingdom ripe for attack by the forces. No space.
Yeah.
From, I guess that might have been you. I can't blame
No, that's not me. That's not me.
So
these
it's a
are
copy
all
and
copied
paste.
and pastes. Yep.
Okay. All right. So making the kingdom ripe for attack by the forces from the dark underworld. Princess Kitty and her subjects are now in danger. Can you save the day? Control one of 4 brave knights, face hundreds of evil creatures, and protect the princess at all costs. Jet Set Knights is an old-school arcade action platformer inspired by classics from the Golden Age. Experience a new take on the classic with unique tower defense and RPG elements.
You had a little Bobby Brady moment there, didn't you?
Yeah. I don't know
right.
what's going on with that one.
Little Big Workshop comes to PS4. Imagine a magical factory appearing right in your living room. A carefully planned masterpiece where diligent workers throw together anything customers want. Rubber ducks and dressers, drones and electric guitars, scooters, and other wonderful goods can be created from many different materials and sold for hard cash. Cash you invest right back into your factory to get more machines, more workers, and grow your business. In Little Big Workshop, you become a factory tycoon.
Pool comes to PS4. An easy-to-play pool game for all ages. Play against another person, 2-player, or against the AI, artificial intelligent, or against the AI player, and rediscover the fun and excitement of this classic arcade game. With stunning high-definition 3D graphics and realistic physics, you will feel like you are playing on a real table.
All right. It's smart to name a game Pool, by the way.
Yeah.
I see stuff like that every once in a while when I'm like, very smart to release a game like that. Praetorians HD Remaster comes to PS4. Relive the celebrated real-time strategy classic Praetorians, reimagined in high definition. Praetorians is set amidst the political machinations of an emerging Roman Empire. Prove your worth on the battlefields of Egypt, the combat theaters of Gaul, and finally the heart of the empire itself in Italy, in the crusade to become emperor. Your quest will not be an easy one, as the empire is heavily defended by thousands of different troop types and war machines, all with special skills and individual strengths. To emerge victorious, you'll need to learn to combine your units and exploit the weaknesses of your enemies. But beware, the closer you get to the emperor, the closer you get to facing the Praetorian Guard, the most powerful and deadly fighting force in the empire.
Rebel Galaxy Outlaw comes to PS4. Out of cash, out of luck, out on the fringe. Juno Markev has a killer to tail, a debt to pay, and more trouble headed her way. Oh, nice little rhyme there.
Yeah.
Rebel Galaxy Outlaw takes place in a greasy blue-collar world of outlaws, truckers, cops, and thieves. Strap into a variety of spacecraft, settle a score in a filthy space bar over a game of 8-ball, rock out to over 24 hours of music, and engage in white knuckle dogfights. In the Dodge sector, it's hard to get by. and even harder to get even.
Yeah, so this is a sequel to Rebel Galaxy that came to PS4 back in 2016. Pretty well-regarded game. So we'll see how that does. Tamiku comes to PS4. You are an alien from a distant galaxy who is totally obsessed with blow-up balloons. Having popped every last balloon on your home planet, you must now venture to other worlds in search of more balloons to pop. Inspired by classic arcade games, Tamiku is an arcade game in which you have to burst all the balloons of a level without being killed. To do this, you will face different dangers, jump, run, and quickly inflate the red balloons. When I was reading this, I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like what I'm looking for. And then I found out it was one of the games from that publisher, Retallica or whatever, that does the awful trophies. And I just refuse to support them. No offense, but just won't do it.
All right. Tennis World Tour 2 comes to PS4. Play as the world's top players or create your own player to try to dominate the world rankings. See, I knew I was going to start to slip by the end. Faster paced, with more animations and more realism. Experience the true sensations of tennis in singles or doubles games and challenge your friends locally or online.
All right. The Secret Order Return to the Buried Kingdom comes to PS4. The Buried Kingdom on the verge of collapse. That's what it says. Maintaining the balance between peace and chaos has become almost impossible as the dragons start to behave unpredictably. Who's behind all the magic anomalies? Explore beautiful locations, encounter unique beasts. I almost said breasts. I didn't mean to. It doesn't say that.
That'd be a more interesting game.
Yeah,
for sure.
Solve riddles, reach the finale of this epic quest, and discover the power of friendship. Get to the bottom of the unexplainable events in the Buried Kingdom and save all of its inhabitants in this thrilling fantasy experience. I don't know that I want to encounter unique breasts, but that's just me. You know?
Something to think about for sure. Unrailed comes to PS4. Unrailed is a chaotic online and couch co-op multiplayer railroad construction game where you work together with your friends as a team to build a train track across endless procedurally generated worlds. Master encounters with its inhabitants, upgrade your train, and keep it from derailing. Play cooperatively with up to 4 players in a single team, or challenge the co-op skills of your friends in a 2 versus 2 game.
All right, next up, Xenocrisis comes to Vita. Xenocrisis is an arena shooter, run and gun your way through thousands of adversaries as you explore the devastated research outpost, searching for survivors and ultimately facing the origin of the outpost's demise. Outpost 88 is divided into 7 distinct areas, each being randomly generated with each play, meaning that your strategy must evolve on the fly if you're to succeed in your mission. Collect dog tags from vanquished enemies to upgrade your equipment between areas and look out for special weapons, which will give you a momentary advantage. So earlier, Dustin, before we get into the final game, I said that I saw a game that really made me want to play something, and this was the game, Xenocrisis. This game looks fucking awesome. And I started reading about it. It looks like Smash TV in a way, if people remember that game. It's made by a studio called Bitmap Bureau, which is, by the way, an awesome name for a studio. But the interesting thing about this game is that it's brand new. It's on Genesis and Mega Drive. It's on Dreamcast. It's on Neo Geo. And then it's also on PS4, Vita, Switch, everything else. Isn't that interesting? So they published physical cartridges for Genesis and Mega Drive, and they published CDs for Neo Geo. That's fucking dope. That's so dope. I love that. You know, it reminds me of that game, Pure Solar, that came to Dreamcast like 5 years ago. It also came to PS4.
Right.
So highly recommend people go look into this game. It's super cool.
That's interesting. There's a company, actually, one of the only Pittsburgh game devs called, I want to say it's Mega Cat, that they do games like this where they also release them on like Sega Genesis on actual cartridges and stuff. So pretty neat.
Yeah, I do like that. And I've seen the Genesis stuff and the Dreamcast stuff before, but I've never seen Neo Geo. That's interesting stuff.
Those are the big cartridges, right?
Neo Geo, I think, use CDs, or that might be Turbo Duo. Let me look. Oh, no, Neo Geo did use cartridges.
Yeah, they have those big cartridges.
Yeah, let me see here. I might be confusing Oh, yeah, no, they did have the big cartridges. You're right. So I guess they're publishing those. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, last one. WWE 2K Battlegrounds comes to PS4. The world of WWE is your battleground with over-the-top arcade action as your favorite WWE superstars and legends battle in interactive environments around the world. Compete using special abilities and power-ups in match types like Steel Cage, Royal Rumble, and more.
All right, so that's all the games that have come out over the last week for mostly PS4. There's a Vita game in there. No PSVR games to speak of this week, but maybe we'll have some next week. All right, Chris. Dustin.
Damn, dude.
Wow, I'm sorry. I've done this 116 times with him. I'm used to saying the same things. You got to understand.
It's okay. I can be your Chris for right
But don't
now.
you understand how that might happen?
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's okay.
The segue.
It's all good.
Don't make me feel bad. All right, Dustin. Tradition dictates we end with 6 listener questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from Patreon. And remember, you can support us, patreon.com/ColinsLastStand for all sorts of perks, like more than 10,000 of you do. We can't do the show without you, so thank you very much for that. Sam writes in and says, hey, Colin, first time writing in. I first heard you on the 3 Red Lights podcast in 2006, maybe. That's a throwback. I've been listening ever since in regard to your comments around how some websites were framing the announcement of Hogwarts Legacy. That's the upcoming Harry Potter game. I am wondering if you are being a bit hypocritical. You often mention associated Chinese interests and the CCP, that's the Chinese Communist Party, when discussing games that are associated with Tencent. I assume you're uncomfortable with the possibility of CCP values, which you disagree with, being furthered by Chinese involvement in some games development. Can you blame the websites you mentioned on the podcast for noting Rowling's positions on transgenderism? If the sites feel worried about her values, which they disagree with, may be furthered by her involvement in Hogwarts Legacy's development. Keep up all your great work. All the best. I encourage Sam to actually write in. I think he might have written in with a DM, and I told him to write in with this so we can talk about it. I want to get into this a little bit, but I'm curious from the start. How do you feel about, Dustin, the whole thing with Hogwarts Legacy, what's going on with JK Rowling and the transgender kind of stuff and all that? I mean, where do you stand on all this, if you even have an opinion on it?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation just because I haven't closely followed the things that she actually said. I don't from what I've gathered, the things that she said hasn't necessarily been as crazy as some people would lead you to believe. But I honestly really can't stand by that because I honestly don't really know. I haven't really looked into it. But as far as this game, I mean, we have to, all the time, we divorce the creator from the creation all the time. It just depends on whether it's in the forefront of our mind or not. Because I mean, you could be like, well, I don't like anything Disney because Walt Disney was racist or whatever. I mean, it's not that I'm demanding ultimate consistency out of people, but I mean, this kind of thing happens all the time. I personally would argue that the CCP, getting involved in games, I mean, I feel like it's just a whole different ballpark when we're talking about business interests and political stuff and not social issues. But I don't know, maybe I'm off base here.
Yeah, so I'm not a Harry Potter fan. Like I've said in the previous episodes, I read a few of them when I was younger, but JK Rowling is an interesting person because she's essentially so rich that she's uncancelable. So she can say whatever she wants. And whether or not you agree with it is another thing entirely, of course. But I feel like, here's my thing, and I'll get into a little bit of what Sam's talking about here. But with Rowling, my issue with Rowling is different from the Communist Party in China, because frankly, what the communists in China are doing is about 1,000 million billion trillion times worse than anything JK Rowling has said. And so I think it's two different things. And that's why I don't like this throwing around of the word hypocritical, because it's like the communists in China have concentration camps. They disappear people. There's no voting. There are no elections. There's no freedom. They have social media scores. They spy on people. And I mean, just because A and B can both happen doesn't mean A and B are equivalent. There's no way that JK Rowling and anything she's ever said is anywhere on the level of what the Chinese communists do. So no, I don't think that there's any sort of hypocrisy here, which is what Sam's saying. But I also think the big thing with JK Rowling is that everything she says about transgender people is often taken out of context. She wrote an entire letter in support of transgender people. I believe that she supports transgender people. I support transgender people and the right to live your life to your exact specifications, so long as you are not hurting anyone else. What Rowling is saying and what her position is that it seems like they're that some transgender support or some transgender activism seems to kind of trying to erase the experiences, the lived experiences of biological women. And I'm not going to turn my back on that and say that that's wrong. I mean, I believe JK Rowling and the things she said. She's a survivor of sexual assault. She claims she was raped and domestically abused. I think everyone believes her. And she basically is just like, she got in a lot of trouble for kind of making fun of the idea of using the term people who menstruate. And she's like, they're called women. And right. I think that both groups of people can be right. So I have no real issue with a lot of the things JK Rowling says, because it seems to be pro women. I consider myself pro women, but also if you just read her words and you don't project what you want her to say, then she's pretty clearly pro trans too. And I'm both of those things. So I have no problem saying those things and kind of supporting JK Rowling's position, even if I don't agree with everything she says. And similar to Dustin, I've not read everything she said, but I just know for a fact, based on her letters and tweets, that what she's saying and what people are interpreting are just two different things. And to compare that to Chinese involvement with Tencent and all of that, I mean, that's just, I mean, come on, man. You know, I appreciate you writing in, Sam, but I'm happy to defend myself too. The other thing though, with Hogwarts Legacy, Chris, that's, Dustin, sorry. I'm so used to it. I'm sorry. What's so interesting about this, Dustin, is that Avalanche, the studio that's making it, and WBI is obviously publishing it, they basically released a statement saying that JK Rowling has no involvement in the game. And to that, I say bullshit. They're lying to you. They're totally lying to you. JK Rowling, as I've said in the previous episode, is notoriously hands-on. I was reading a story about her recently about how there was a guy that she went to court with because he was trying to make like an unofficial Hogwarts encyclopedia. And she sued him because she might intend one day to write one herself, right? So like there's no unofficial work or whatever. That's fine. It's her IP. It's her license. But she is really heavily involved. And she has a few companies that she founded that deal with the various lore and all of that with Harry Potter. So this is all going back to her, guys. Whether or not you want to believe it or not, she is definitely involved in this game in some way. And if you have a problem with what JK Rowling has said about transgender people, I respect your position. But understand that there's no mincing words here. Whatever Avalanche and WBI are saying is just not up to snuff with the 25 years of JK Rowling experience in the Harry Potter world, in which she has her hands over everything. This would be a very unique product if she had nothing to say about it. So just wanted to throw that out there. If you guys really don't want to give her money, then resist the urge to do so. I personally am going to play that game. I think it looks really cool. Dharma Police wrote into us, Dustin. He says, hey, Colin and Chris. In the last episode, Colin mentioned that he had heard that Sony was making more disc-based PS5 consoles than discless. However, does this strategy make sense? We know digital sales account for upwards of 80% of total sales for a number of companies. That's a little high, I think.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, but it's more like maybe 40 to 60, I would say. Would it not be more cost effective for Sony and Microsoft to produce mostly digital only consoles if that is where the market dominance lies? Not only that, after the acquisition of Bethesda, it's abundantly clear that the next gen battleground will be along the lines of streaming. I wonder if you found any more details on the ratio of disc to discless consoles being produced by Sony. There's an obvious answer to this, Dustin, but I'm wondering if you know what it is.
Yeah. Sony, it doesn't make as much money on the version without a disc drive because they're probably losing money on the version without a disc drive. Like straight up, that disc drive cost them $20. And that's something that Digital Foundry has said in the past as well. So I think that they're putting those out there. I mean, and they have less of them as well, probably intentionally, because they can say, hey, we have a SKU of the PlayStation 5 that only costs $399. I think that probably down the line, maybe in like 2 to 3 years, we're going to see more and more discless versions of the PS5 be available. But they know that people are going to spend, whether they're going to use the console digital only, or they're going to do a mix of both, or use only discs. They know that they can just sell the version with the disc drive to everybody, because everyone just, if you're a digital only person, then you may think on the back of your mind, oh, well, I'd like to have the disc drive to play 4K movies, or maybe I just like to have one just in case. So either way, I think that they're pushing the version with the disc drive because they don't lose as much money on those at the time being.
It could be. I think that it's even simpler than that. And by the way, I should reiterate what Dharma Police is saying here. I have it on excellent authority that Sony is not only manufacturing many, many more disc versions than discless versions, but it's substantial. Like it's a substantial difference. It's not like 60-40 or something like that. my take on this, Dustin, is that they don't want to fuck around with their retail partners quite yet.
Right.
Retail partners are not going to be thrilled about selling digital only consoles in which they will never have a prayer of selling a game to you on ever again. So I think that that's part of it, is that Sony's like, we introduced this console, it exists, we're going to probably tip the scales more towards it as time goes on, but for now, let's play nice with Amazon, with GameStop, with Walmart, because they want to sell some games and stuff. I really think that that has a lot to do with it as well. So I think that over time, you're going to see many more discless versions available, to the point where it's, I think, entirely possible that the inevitable PS5 redesign in, let's say, 2023 or 2024 might not have a disc drive at all. And there might not be an option to have discs. So we'll see how it all plays out. But thank you for writing in, Dharma Police. Neji wrote in and said, howdy, partners. This one's for Colin. I've been listening to this podcast for a while now, and there's something I need to know. Do you really not care if a game sells well? Many times when talks of game sales are brought up, you mentioned how you don't give a fuck about how a game sells, even ones you adore. How can that be true for a franchise you like, knowing that sales can make or break that franchise? I don't know. Just find it weird/hypocritical. Stop with the hypocrisy word. You guys are not using this word right. I don't think you think this, it's like the old Princess Bride thing. This word does not mean what you think it means. Keep up the good work, boys, and you're always welcome in Cleveland. Thank you, Naji. So I think I probably overstate this sometimes, but generally speaking, I say that in order to kind of let the audience know that I'm not affected by how a game sells. I really don't. I mean, I ultimately don't care. I say this about Sony all the time. If I'm the only person in the world that buys a PlayStation 5, I don't know that I really care. I'm just not I am both not figuratively or literally invested in this. And so I'm not going to like lose any sleep. I care that Lilymo games sell well because I own the company. But I'm not going to like lose sleep because some game underperformed or something like that. It's just, it isn't that important to me. It's interesting, but it's not important to me. Do you give a shit if games sell well or not?
Obviously, the franchises you like, you hope that they sell well so they continue to make those games. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. And I think it's interesting. Just, I mean, this is kind of a side note, but the pointing out of like hypocrisy, which this is something I've noticed across not only people in this podcast, but over on Maddie's show as well. It's like, there's like a weird tension right now that I don't know if it's because it's just like new consoles are coming out and there's like a, console war bullshit, but there's like
console war a brewing.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I keep seeing this come up. And I when Chris was talking about this, about like being biased and how people are like, oh, well, what you're saying sounds so biased. And I'm like, you don't listen to someone for 100% unbiased commentary. Like, you listen to someone because you like their opinions, right? And I guess, I don't know, I think it's fine to point out, if someone's being hypocritical, but it just seems odd to me right now.
Yeah, there's something to brew in. I don't know where the contentiousness comes from. And I've never really, well, not never. There was a time when I really was engaged in the console wars during the SNES era, especially, but I just don't care. I want the companies I like and the games I like to do well, but I guess the greater point I'm making is just more philosophical, which is that if I'm the only person that buys a game and even enjoys it, I don't care. It doesn't bother me, I guess, is more the perspective that I am looking at it from. But Naji, thank you for writing in. Heathen James wrote into us and said, hey, Sacred Seas, first time writing in since I joined the Patreon crew. So here it goes. Welcome, Heathen James. This one is directed more at Colin. Colin, like yourself, I am a massive JRPG geek. I'm most at home immersed in tales of swords and sorcery than I am in almost any other genre. I wanted to get your most granular take on the subject. Final Fantasy 16 is coming, and while it looks gorgeous and I'll absolutely get it day one, I'm a bit let down that it isn't turn-based. I get it, most modern gamers prefer a more action-heavy game regardless of genre, but to me, there's still plenty of room for a AAA turn-based RPG. It doesn't have to be a strict clone of Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, as there have been plenty of innovative titles that have tweaked the formula over the past decade. Am I alone in wanting this from Square? Thanks for all you do, gentlemen, and Godspeed. Well, James, the RPG I'm writing is turn-based, so you have that to look forward to. But to me, Dustin, this wasn't a huge surprise because Square Enix is kind of shooting with two different barrels with a JRPG that covers both of them. They have Dragon Quest that is, with the exception of Dragon Quest 10 rather, very traditional in its approach. And even Dragon Quest XI is a very traditional turn-based role-playing game. It's just it's much prettier, but it's the same game that was made in the 80s. I really like Dragon Quest, so I'm not insulting it. Final Fantasy has shown a greater propensity, especially since 12, but really more towards 13, to do different things with combat. And as much as I'd love to see a turn-based, beautiful, slick Final Fantasy 16 game and turn-based combat, I just don't know how it would really work. It seems like that's more geared towards, at best, a 32-bit era role-playing game. And so I think Square is trying to change with the times and attract some more people. And I don't find it that surprising, considering the history of Final Fantasy since at least 2006 has not given us the active battle or turn-based systems that we are really used to. So it's not a huge surprise. The good news about this episode is that Dustin is a JRPG fan. So do you have any input into this inquiry from James?
Yeah, I guess just the fact that these Final Fantasy games are big AAA budget games. And the reality is, if they made it turn-based, that it just simply wouldn't sell as well in 2020. And not to say that there aren't commercially successful modern turn-based JRPGs, but not to the extent of the budget of a mainline Final Fantasy game. And I don't know, I can understand wanting that specifically from the Final Fantasy universe, but there are plenty of really, really great turn-based JRPGs that are innovating still now. I mean, I know this seems like a little bit of a joke coming from me, but Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal have done a lot of really interesting things in this space. So, and even now, that team is working on a more traditional fantasy style game with Project ReFantasy. So, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get another turn-based mainline Final Fantasy game, but there are still plenty of other options out there for you.
It's not a realistic thing for them to do because it's so important, Final Fantasy, to Square Enix's bottom line, but it would be really cool to see a Mega Man 9 or 10 style Final Fantasy game made in the mainline series. Like, it would have been cool for Final Fantasy 16 to just straight up be a 16-bit role-playing game, right? Then you can get away with something like that, and I would love for them to have the balls to do something like that, but it is a little risky for that series to do that. I don't know how thrilled a lot of people would be about that. I would be thrilled about that. So I think you just have to kind of take Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, separate them, and you get kind of what you want out of both of them. Dragon Quest is lower budget and more traditional. Final Fantasy 16 is, first of all, not going to be out for years, and certainly not going to be turn-based. I did like Final Fantasy VII Remake's kind of approach to turns and menus and magic, especially, and materia. I thought it was really clever. So maybe we'll get some more of that, but it's clear that Final Fantasy 16 is very inspired by Final Fantasy 15. I wasn't a huge fan of what I played at 15. I didn't get very far in it because I just was kind of turned off by it, but I understand the skepticism, James, but I think the game looks awesome. I actually don't watch game trailers very often, except for when they first appear during these shows, and I've watched that Final Fantasy 16 trailer multiple times, which is a very rare thing for me to do. So I'm excited about it personally. Richard Jorgens wrote into us. I wanted to put this one on here because Dustin's here specifically. He can speak to this. Hello, CNC. The PS5 only has an 825 gigabyte SSD, and with the mandatory install sizes revealed, this will not be enough even in the short term. It's worth noting that if you buy Demon's Souls and Miles Morales, by the way, on launch day, that will be 20% of your hard drive. My question is, why hasn't Sony talked more about expanding the storage of the PS5? Mark Cerny mentioned in his presentation, Mark Cerny's Power Hour, as I like to call it, that not all SSDs will work with the PS5 as they need to be the same speed as the internal SSD. Will Sony publish a list of SSDs that work with the PS5, or how will they make sure people buy an SSD that is compatible with the PS5? Dustin, you understand technology. You put together my beautiful computer. So talk to me a little bit about this.
I actually did a little research on this question beforehand to be ready. So to put a little bit of context, people in the actually today, I'm looking at an article from Polygon, unfortunately, but it says the Series X expansion card is $220 for 1 terabyte of additional SSD storage. And a lot of people are a little surprised by that price. But I think that part of the reason that Sony hasn't talked about expansion is, first of all, expect similar pricing or higher right now. Because if we look, they actually commented on this, and I think that the question mentioned this. To get into more granular detail, though, so right now the standard with SSDs, this is going to get real technical, is PCIe 3.0, and that's basically the interface in which it interacts from the SSD itself to the computer. 3.0 drives cannot even hit the standard 5.5 gigabytes per second that is required for the PlayStation 5. They're capped at 3.5 gigabytes. So just now on the PC space, we're starting to see PCIe 4.0 M.2 drives hit the market. And right now, those are like, for example, I have a PCIe Gen 4 drive up on Amazon for 1 terabyte. It costs $200, and the speed on it is 5,000 megabytes, or basically around 5 gigs. So currently, this $200 drive that recently came out on Amazon is still not fast enough for the PlayStation 5, because in that statement, I don't know if it was during the actual Power Hour or released afterwards, they said that not only do they need to be 5.5 gigabytes, but because of the way the interface works, they need to have even more speed to have headroom for the way it interacts with the PlayStation 5. So the reason they haven't talked about expanding the storage is because the drives don't fully even exist yet on the marketplace. So they will be probably... I honestly don't really know when we're going to see drives that are fast enough. They kind of estimated that around the time of the launch of the PS5, we would start to see compatible drives. But as I mentioned, they have to test them and make sure they work. In addition to that, right now, it's kind of the Wild West for these drives, and the fact that some of them have big heat sinks, which will make them not fit in the PS5. So it's kind of a mess right now as far as what will work and what won't work. But I'm expecting that hopefully around launch or shortly after, we'll find some compatible drives. But I will tell you that they will not be cheap. Expect at least $200.
Yeah, I think the pricing probably has a lot to do with it based on what you've explained. And also, not to be too glib, but they might be taking a hint from the Vita experience too. They really fucked the Vita by talking about expansion and how much it cost. And it really turned people off. You want to get the machine in people's hands first and then kind of hit them later on if you can with the bad news, which is that the SSDs are going to make some money. So who knows? Maybe they learned a lesson from that, because I really think that they hobbled the Vita by talking about the memory card pricing. Although that was different. That was them just trying to make a profit. It seems like with this, they're just going to have to play on the market and see if they can get the needed goods. 825 gigs is not going to last. There's no doubt about that. But I often delete shit off my console anyway, so...
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that we can hope is that the PS5 is able to download games faster, just because, dude, I don't know what is going on with PSN. It is the slowest for downloading games. Like, I can download a game on my PC many times faster, the same size. And it's just because something about PSN is so slow. So if there's a storage problem, then hopefully at least there's a situation where if we have to delete a game, the download time isn't going to be completely unreasonable.
We're going to find out very soon. It's exciting. Less than 2 months away. I thought we would end with this question from Troy Yarborough. It's a good, fun question to end with, easy. It says, hey, fellas, what games do you plan on kicking off the new console with? The slate of launch games is so loaded, in my opinion, and personally, I'm planning on playing Black Ops Cold War and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or as I like to call it, Assassin's Creed Ragnarok. I'm definitely playing Miles Morales first, I would assume. I'm going to get Demon's Souls as well. I'm going to probably try to play Godfall just because it's there. I'm not so interested in Assassin's Creed, but I definitely will play Black Ops Cold War. So those are the games that kind of come to mind for me, but I think it's going to start off with Miles Morales. Where do you stand with your PS5? What do you want to play on it?
Yeah, for me, the first thing I'm putting in is Demon's Souls, for sure. That's a game that I checked out when it came out, but I didn't really get the whole... I guess at the time, it wasn't even established, the whole Souls-like genre, if you even want to call it that. But so now that I've played a lot more of those games, like Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time, I'm really excited to go back. And what's interesting to me about Demon's Souls is that this is one of the only true next-gen games we have available to us, just because so many of these other games are coming out on the previous gen. I think it's that and Godfall are and maybe what's that? Destruction All Stars.
Yeah,
I think
Destruction
is
All-Stars.
exclusive. So very few games as far as exclusively next gen. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about Demon Souls as well.
Yeah, Demon Souls looks cool. I mean, I think I've told this story about Demon Souls, so I'm sorry about it, but when I worked at IGN and I was on PlayStation coverage, we actually ignored that game completely when it came out. And we got so many complaints about it not reviewing the game that we went back and hired someone to review it. And then that's when we found out that it ended up being this, I think we gave it like a 9 or something like that. Demon Souls beat my ass at the time. I just don't have the patience for it. But as it's a launch game, I mean, I played Knack and shit like that. I just want to play as many of the games from first and second party as I can. That's kind of why I'm interested in Godfall as well, just to have played it. But I'm a little disappointed that there's nothing like Shadowfall or anything this time around, which I thought was a really fun, crisp weekend shooter. I guess we'll get that from Black Ops, but I wish there was just one more first-party game to play. But there isn't. There actually is technically no first-party exclusive to play on PlayStation 5 at launch. because Demon Souls is second-party, and obviously Miles Morales is first-party, but cross-gen, like you said. So, nonetheless, it's exciting. I will, in the coming weeks, we're going to start breaking down the launch games and comparing and contrasting the previous PlayStation generations and, of course, the competition as well. We'll get into all of that both here on Sacred Symbols and Sacred Symbols Plus. But for the time being, this lengthy episode of Sacred Symbols is over. Dustin, you made it through your inaugural maiden voyage.
It has been a long one. It's we're sitting around 2.5 hours. So
yeah, so
I don't know if I'm chatty or something, but I don't know. Felt like a good episode to me.
No, you did very well. I'll be really interested to hear what people think and if we should just fire Chris maybe and keep Dustin around. So just let us know. And we're wishing Chris the very best, obviously, as well as he heals up. And that's basically it. Do you have any closing comments? Who knows when the next time your voice will be heard on this show?
Any closing comments? All I want to say, shout out Watch Side Quest on our YouTube channel because it's really good. And I know that there are probably a lot of people that listen to the show that may not even know about it. And so come watch it, support both myself and the one and only Mr. Matty Plays as we make some awesome videos for you guys.
Cool. Very good. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. We'll see you next time for more Sacred Symbols. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product of and a registered trademark of Colin's Last Stand, LLC, and is recorded from Richmond, Virginia, and Burbank, California, USA. This show is conceived by, is written by, and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Chris Raygun. You can find me on Twitter at NoTaxation and on Instagram at CLS Moriarty. Chris is on Twitter at Chris R. Gunn and on Instagram at Chris_Ray_Gun. Sacred Symbols is edited by Dustin Furman. To message the show online, please use Patreon's DM service. As you know, all of Colin's Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. The following names are at the producer level or higher on Patreon, and we are eternally grateful for your kindness, generosity, and fandom. Paul Joyce, Ryan T. Mandel, Jorge Palomino, Enrique Perez, Don Lee, Brad Cooley, SL the FMA, Daniel Diamore, Patrick Leslie, Jeremy Key, Joey Finelli, Azan, Ben, Michael Vecchio, Morgan Ashley, Miguel A. Brewer, Isaac Wastman, Zach Parsley, Ross Marenka, Jerome Ferreira, Stephen Nieder, Gregory Slavinsky, Bjorn Campbell, An Unofficial Controller Podcast, Andrew Morgan, Constantine Valencia, Nick DeMarco, Jariah King, Homeworld Hub, Shane Rayum, Mark Boggio, Jonathan Reich, Chad Lewis, Keith A. Lewis, Lennon Brixey, Peter Reynolds, Greg Juliff, Spencer Brand, Joe McPartlin, Eric Finkenbeiner, Lou and Ray Loper, Josh Bushing, Betty Ann Moriarty, John Schultz, David Chestnut, Tony Zuniga, Alex Cabrera, Corey Wyatt, Adam Nix, Michael Gates, Alex Gates, Sean Chandler, Petro Rose, Justin Wagaman, Tyler Harris, Toby Shootman, Madmock Media, Lawrence F. Prokop, Toothless Gibbon, Martin Beck, Donnie Nolan, Todd Paxton, Josh Yeager, Miranda Grubba, Michael S., Marius Garson Peterson, William O'Carroll, Mike Wayne, Mubarak, Gerald Pennington, Phil Crone, Dylan Burns, Brian Chan, Connor Gashian, Throw7, Josh Gravelick, Tyler Bello, Anton K., Sean Battershaw, Gio Corsi, Josh McKinney, Alan Tremblay, James Kinslow III, John Cordero, Organic Produce, Carl Tolman, Richter86, Nathan R., Joshua Smallwood, McDog18, Patrick Harper, George Anthony Nunez, Kyle Hagel, Colin Love, Ryan R. Kittredge, Barrett Boswell, Hugo's Desk, Chris Buston, Sean Mason, Damon Weathers, Matthew Purdue, Jesse Owen, Chris Galvin, Ryan Murdoch, Colin Davenport, Blake Israel, Sci-Fi Book Club, Auntie Kinnanen, Taylor Barkley, Scott Lovelace, Andrew Parker, Robbie Hensley, Rodney Coleman, Chris Moore, Gavin, Bloody Fang, Eric Harden, Matt
Martin, Mason Cadillac, Richard Hebert III, Saul Balcazar, Raul Melendez, Kevin Komaki of Fortuna, Boots, Megadet, TB Lightning, Galja, Darren Gardner, Daryl E. Naiman, David Castanez, Greg Lotta, Christopher DeVio, Ray Leja, Jay Getter, Vexius, JJ Game, Jeff McCardo, Zach Bonham, Colin Jewell, Nelson LeBlanc, Daniel Johnson, Letteriant Johnson, Nick Thornton, and Casual Misfits Gaming.